Ryan Hayes stood frozen in the doorway, file gripped in his trembling hand, watching his billionaire boss Olivia Sterling stare at her reflection with an expression he'd never seen before, pure, unfiltered doubt. When she turned and asked, "Do I look good in this dress?" he knew his answer would shatter the careful distance he'd maintained for 3 years. Between raising his daughter alone and surviving each day without his late wife, he'd built walls no one could breach. But Olivia's vulnerable eyes were already tearing them down. One honest answer. That's all it would take to destroy everything he'd protected. If you're ready to discover how a single moment of truth can unravel two carefully guarded lives, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The Sterling Industries Tower stood like a monument to ambition against the Chicago skyline, its glass facade reflecting the city's restless energy. On the 47th floor, Ryan Hayes moved through the executive suite with practiced invisibility, the kind perfected by people who understood their place in the world's machinery. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. He knew because he'd checked his phone 3 times in the last 10 minutes, calculating exactly how much longer before he could leave, pick up Chloe from his neighbor's apartment, and maybe, if luck existed, read her a bedtime story before she fell asleep clutching that worn stuffed rabbit she refused to outgrow. The file in his hand contained the Hendricks merger documents, weeks of work compressed into 200 pages of legal language that would either save Sterling Industries' fourth quarter or sink it completely. Olivia Sterling wanted them on her desk before she left for the Belmont Gala, some charity function where Chicago's elite gathered to write checks and pretend they cared about causes whose names they'd forget by morning. Ryan didn't judge. He couldn't afford to. Judgment was a luxury for people with options. The executive floor was eerily quiet, most of the staff having fled hours ago to whatever lives they maintained outside these walls. His footsteps made no sound on the expensive carpet, some designer variety that probably cost more than his annual salary. He'd learned to move quietly, learned to be the kind of employee who completed tasks efficiently and disappeared before anyone remembered to ask for something else. Olivia's office door stood half open, light spilling into the hallway. He raised his hand to knock, following the protocol she'd established when she took over the company from her father 3 years ago. Always knock. Always wait for acknowledgement. Never assume access. But his knock went unanswered. Ryan hesitated, listening. No voices. No phone conversation. Just silence with an undercurrent of something he couldn't identify. He should leave the file with her assistant. That was procedure. That was safe. Instead, he pushed the door wider. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who'd built an empire before her 30th birthday. Minimalist, powerful, and completely devoid of anything personal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Chicago that made the city look conquered. Her desk was chrome and glass, reflecting the skyline like a mirror of her ambition. But Olivia Sterling wasn't at her desk. She stood in front of the full-length mirror near her private bathroom, wearing a dress that looked like it cost more than Ryan's car. Midnight blue, cut in ways that suggested rather than revealed, elegant without being safe. Her dark hair was swept up in something intricate that had probably required professional help. Diamond earrings caught the light. She looked like power wearing an evening gown, except for her face. Ryan had worked for Olivia Sterling for 3 years, first as a junior analyst, then as her senior project coordinator after he'd saved the Melbourne acquisition from imploding. He'd seen her dismantle competitors in boardrooms, watched her face down her father's old guard with the kind of cold precision that made grown men reconsider their career choices. He'd witnessed her fire a VP without blinking, then immediately recruit his replacement with triple the salary. He'd never seen her look uncertain. But standing in front of that mirror, Olivia Sterling looked lost. She turned before he could retreat, and their eyes met in the reflection. For a second, maybe less, something passed between them that Ryan couldn't name. Something that made his grip tighten on the file folder until the edges crumpled. Ryan. His name and her voice sounded different than usual, softer, missing the professional distance she maintained like armor. "I didn't hear you come in." "I knocked," he said, finding his voice. "You didn't answer. I should have. I'll just leave these and... Do I look good in this dress?" The question hit him like a physical thing. 5 years of carefully maintained boundaries, of knowing his place, of protecting what remained of his shattered heart. All of it crystallized in that single moment of her asking something real. He should have said yes. Should have offered the kind of empty compliment that meant nothing and preserved everything. "You look fine, Ms. Sterling. Very professional. Have a good evening." But Olivia's eyes held something desperate in them, something that reminded him of the way Chloe looked when she woke from nightmares about the mother she barely remembered. Vulnerability, raw and undefended. Ryan had lost the ability to lie to vulnerability. "I can't take my eyes off you." The words came out rougher than he intended, honest in a way that felt dangerous. He watched her expression shift, surprise, then something warmer, then a quick retreat back behind the mask she wore for the world. "That's not what I asked." "It's what you needed to hear." Silence stretched between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered with the lives of millions who would never know this moment existed, who would never understand how a simple question could feel like the ground shifting beneath you. Olivia turned from the mirror to face him directly, and Ryan noticed things he'd trained himself not to see. The slight tremor in her hands, the way her breath came a little too quick, the carefully applied makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion underneath. "You always do that," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Say exactly what you mean. No calculation. No angle." She moved closer, and he caught the scent of her perfume, something expensive that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. "Most people spend their entire lives learning to lie to me gracefully. You never even tried." Ryan set the file on her desk, needing something to do with his hands. "Lying takes energy I don't have, Ms. Sterling." "Olivia." "What?" "When it's just us, you can call me Olivia." She studied him with an intensity that made him want to check if his tie was straight. "We've worked together for 3 years, Ryan. I think we're past formalities when the building's empty." This was dangerous territory, the kind that came with consequences he couldn't afford. Ryan had exactly one priority in his life, making sure Chloe grew up feeling loved and secure. Everything else was negotiable, including whatever this moment wanted to become. "The Hendricks files," he said, gesturing to the folder. "Everything's reviewed and flagged. The merger should close cleanly if their board agrees to the timeline adjustments in Section 7. You're changing the subject." "Yes." "Why?" Because admitting he'd noticed the way she laughed at Chloe's terrible knock-knock jokes when she'd stopped by his desk last week would mean admitting he'd been paying attention to things that weren't his business. Because acknowledging that he'd spent the last 6 months hyper-aware of every time she entered a room would require examining feelings he'd buried with his wife. Because the last time he'd let himself care about someone, she'd died giving birth to their daughter, and he'd spent 5 years learning to survive on the wreckage. "You're going to be late for your gala," he said instead. Olivia's expression shifted through several emotions too quick to catalog. She moved to her desk, picked up a small clutch purse that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her armor was back in place, the momentary crack sealed over. "Thank you for staying late to finish these. It's my job." "It's above and beyond your job, and we both know it." She paused at the door, and for a second he thought she might say something else, something that would make this moment impossible to forget. Instead, she offered a small professional smile. "Go home to Chloe. Tell her I said the rabbit's ears looked very festive with those ribbons," she added. Ryan blinked, surprised she'd noticed, surprised she'd remembered. "She'll be thrilled you saw them. She's a remarkable kid. You're doing something right." The compliment settled somewhere in his chest, warm and uncomfortable. He'd spent 5 years second-guessing every parenting decision, certain he was failing at the one thing that mattered. Hearing it from Olivia Sterling, a woman who evaluated people for a living, meant more than it should. "Thank you." She nodded once, then left, her heels clicking against the marble floor until the elevator doors closed and she disappeared into whatever world billionaires inhabited when they weren't running empires. Ryan stood alone in her office, surrounded by the evidence of her success, and tried to convince himself that moment hadn't changed anything. He failed. The apartment was dark when he let himself in, fumbling for the light switch. Mrs. Chen had texted an hour ago, "Chloe asleep on couch." Tried to move her, but she's stubborn like her daddy. Leftover lo mein in fridge. His neighbor was a saint. Ryan had no idea what he'd have done without her these past 5 years, Probably imploded or been fired for missing too many days when Chloe got sick, or simply drowned in the impossible mathematics of single parenthood. Chloe lay curled on the couch, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, the new purple ribbons on its ears slightly askew. She was 7 years old and already looked so much like Sarah that sometimes Ryan forgot to breathe when he looked at her. Same dark curls, same stubborn chin, same way of frowning in her sleep, like even dreams required serious consideration. He gathered her carefully, muscle memory from 5 years of practice making the movement smooth. She barely stirred, just mumbled something about astronauts and jelly beans, a combination that made perfect sense in whatever dream she inhabited. Her room was exactly what you'd expect from a 7-year-old with an imagination bigger than her vocabulary. Drawings taped to walls, a solar system mobile hanging crooked from the ceiling, books scattered across every surface because she refused to believe in putting things away when she might need them again. Ryan tucked her in, adjusting the blankets the way she liked them. Not too tight, not too loose. Rabbit positioned exactly right. Nightlight on, but not too bright. "Love you, princess," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Love you, infinity," she mumbled back, the response automatic even in sleep. In the kitchen, he found Mrs. Chen's lo mein and ate it standing at the counter, too tired to bother with plates or pretense. The apartment was quiet except for the usual city sounds: traffic, distant sirens, someone's television through thin walls. This was his life, small and ordinary, and absolutely everything that mattered. Ryan pulled out his phone, intending to set tomorrow's alarm, and found himself staring at the screen instead. 10:43 p.m. Olivia would be at the gala by now, surrounded by people in expensive clothes making expensive small talk, probably smiling that professional smile, the one that never reached her eyes. He wondered if anyone there would look at her the way he had tonight, really look, past the dress and the diamonds and the carefully constructed image. Wondered if she'd ask anyone else if she looked good, if she'd find someone brave enough or stupid enough to tell her the truth. "I can't take my eyes off you." Ryan set down the phone, running both hands through his hair. What the hell had he been thinking? You didn't say things like that to your boss. Didn't let moments become something more than professional courtesy. Didn't notice the way her expression shifted when she was uncertain, or remember the exact sound of her laugh, or care whether she felt seen. Except he did. All of it. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for your honesty tonight. It meant more than you know." O.S. Ryan stared at the message for a long time, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. A dozen responses formed and dissolved. Finally, he typed, "Anytime." Simple, safe, completely inadequate for what he actually wanted to say. Her response came immediately. "Dangerous offer, Mr. Hayes." He smiled despite himself, despite knowing better. "I've survived worse risks, Miss Sterling." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Ryan watched them like they contained the secrets of the universe. Finally, "Haven't we all?" "Good night, Ryan." "Good night, Olivia." He saved her number, telling himself it was just practical. Then he deleted the conversation, telling himself it was just smart. Then he stood in his small kitchen in his small apartment and admitted, only to himself, only in the quiet darkness, that something had shifted tonight, something that felt like the beginning of a story he wasn't sure he was ready to read. Friday morning arrived with the aggressive cheer of Chloe jumping on his bed at 6:15 a.m., all elbows and enthusiasm. Dad, wake up. Mrs. Patterson said we're doing science experiments today, and I need to bring a potato, and you promised you'd help me pick a good one." Ryan groaned, pulling a pillow over his face. "Potatoes don't vary that much in quality, princess. That's what people who don't care about science say." She yanked the pillow away, her face inches from his. "This is important. Mrs. Patterson says we're making batteries, and if mine doesn't work, I'll look like I don't understand electrons." "You're 7. Nobody expects you to understand electrons." "I expect me to understand electrons." This was the problem with raising a child who'd inherited her mother's brain. Chloe approached everything with the kind of intensity usually reserved for war planning. Last month it had been the solar system project that required a Jupiter with accurate storm patterns, Dad, not just random swirls. Before that, a book report on dolphins that somehow evolved into a 10-page manifesto on ocean conservation. Ryan sat up, accepting defeat. "Okay, We'll pick the best potato science has ever seen. That's the spirit. She bounced off the bed, already dressed in mismatched clothes that somehow worked together. Also, I need $20 for the field trip next week, and I told Tommy Martinez his theory about dinosaurs having teleportation powers was scientifically implausible, and he cried. So Mrs. Patterson wants to talk to you about social emotional learning, whatever that means. Ryan dropped his head into his hands. It's barely 6 in the morning, Chloe. Time doesn't stop for people who need to process, Dad. That's what you always tell me when I complain about bedtime. She skipped out of the room, singing something about the periodic table, and Ryan wondered, not for the first time, how he'd created such a force of nature. Sarah would have loved this version of their daughter, would have encouraged every wild idea, every impossible question, every moment of fearless curiosity. The ache of her absence hit him like it always did, unexpected, sharp, and absolutely familiar. 5 years hadn't dulled it, just changed its shape. What used to be raw grief had transformed into something quieter, a permanent awareness that someone was missing from every moment, every milestone, every ordinary morning. He showered quickly, dressed in the kind of business casual that suggested competence without trying too hard, and found Chloe in the kitchen creating what appeared to be a potato evaluation system involving charts and a magnifying glass. "This one has good skin integrity," she announced, holding up a russet. "But this one has better symmetry." She held up another. "Which do you think conducts electricity better?" "I think they're potatoes and you're overthinking this. Mom would have helped me pick the right one." The words weren't accusatory, just factual. Chloe did this sometimes, referenced Sarah with the casual certainty of someone who'd constructed a mother from stories and photographs rather than memory. She'd been 2 when Sarah died. The memories she claimed to have were probably manufactured from Ryan's descriptions, from video clips, from the desperate need to feel connected to someone who existed mostly as an absence. "You're right," Ryan said, crouching to her level. "Mom would have made a spreadsheet comparing specific gravity and mineral content. Then she would have written a paper about it." Chloe giggled. "Was she really that nerdy?" "Nerdier. It was her superpower. Like how your superpower is making really good grilled cheese?" "Exactly like that, except with more science and fewer burn marks." They picked 3 potatoes because Chloe insisted on backup options and made it to school with 4 minutes to spare. Ryan walked her to the classroom, enduring her running commentary on everything from cloud formations to why the cafeteria should offer better vegetarian options. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door, wearing the expression of someone who loved teaching but occasionally questioned her life choices. "Mr. Hayes, we need to chat about yesterday's dinosaur incident." Ryan sighed. "She made another kid cry with facts?" "Tommy Martinez is very sensitive about his theories." Mrs. Patterson glanced at Chloe, who was already explaining her potato selection process to a bewildered classmate. "She's not wrong about the scientific implausibility. She just needs to work on delivery. I'll talk to her about tact. Good luck with that." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "She's brilliant, Ryan. Just needs to learn that being right isn't always about proving someone else is wrong." "Sounds like every scientist ever." "Fair point." Ryan kissed Chloe goodbye, extracted a promise that she'd try to be nicer to Tommy, even if his theories defied physics, and made it to the office by 8:30, early enough to look dedicated, late enough to avoid the morning rush. Sterling Industries hummed with the usual Friday energy, people already mentally checked out, counting down to the weekend. Ryan grabbed coffee from the break room, nodded at colleagues whose names he mostly remembered, and settled at his desk to tackle the mountain of emails that had accumulated overnight. Most were routine. Budget approvals, timeline confirmations, someone from accounting asking about expense reports with the kind of passive-aggressive politeness that suggested they'd asked 3 times already. But one email stood out. From o.sterling@sterlingindustries.com to r.hayes@sterlingindustries.com. Subject, Hendricks merger. Follow-up time, 3:47 a.m. Ryan couldn't sleep, reviewed the files again. "Your notes on the intellectual property clauses in Section 12 are exactly right. Their lawyers buried a clause that would have cost us millions in licensing fees. How did you catch that? Also, the gala was exactly as tedious as expected. Spent 3 hours smiling at people I don't like, discussing causes I don't care about, and pretending wealth equals wisdom. You were right about the dress, though. Several people couldn't take their eyes off me. Unfortunately, none of them were anyone I wanted looking. Meet me Monday, 9 a.m. We need to discuss the Melbourne expansion. I want your input before the board meeting. Orion read it twice, trying to decode what lived between the lines. The professional part was straightforward. She'd found his work valuable, wanted his opinion on strategy. Normal boss behavior. The rest, though. The mention of the gala, the callback to his comment about the dress, the admission that she'd been reviewing files at 3:47 in the morning instead of sleeping. That wasn't boss behavior. That was something else. His desk phone rang before he could overthink it. Hayes? Ryan, it's Marcus. His friend's voice carried the kind of urgency that usually preceded problems. Got a minute? Marcus Chen worked in legal, handled contract negotiations, and had been Ryan's unofficial sounding board since his first week at Sterling Industries. They'd bonded over late nights, impossible deadlines, and a shared appreciation for bourbon. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just heard something through the grapevine that involves you. Ryan's stomach tightened. What kind of something? The kind where Olivia Sterling spent 20 minutes at the Belmont Gala last night telling Richard Hendricks that her senior project coordinator was the smartest person in her company, and if the merger didn't close, it was his lawyer's fault, not yours. She said that? Publicly, in front of half of Chicago's business elite. Marcus paused. Ryan, she doesn't compliment people. Ever. She evaluates them, categorizes them, and uses them. But last night, she actively bragged about you. Maybe she was drunk. Olivia Sterling doesn't get drunk. She drinks exactly enough to appear social and maintain complete control. Another pause. What happened between you two? Nothing happened. That was defensive very quickly. Ryan rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. I dropped off some files. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. That's it. About what? Work. Try again. Marcus? Look, I'm not judging. I'm warning. People are already talking. You know how this company operates. Gossip moves faster than actual work. Someone saw you leaving her office late last night. Someone else saw her checking her phone during the gala like she was waiting for a message. Put those together and people start writing stories. There's no story. Then why do you sound like you're trying to convince yourself? Because he was. Because that moment in her office had followed him home, invaded his sleep, and sat waiting when he woke up. Because he'd saved her number and deleted their texts and written a response to her email 3 times before settling on something safely professional. Because somewhere between her asking if she looked good and him answering honestly, something had shifted that couldn't be shifted back. I have to go, Ryan said. Budget meeting in 10. Ryan, I know. I'll be careful. He hung up before Marcus could push further, staring at Olivia's email on his screen. The cursor blinked in the reply field, waiting for him to type something. Anything. Olivia, glad the IP catch helped. Your question. I spent 5 years reading contracts for a firm that specialized in tech acquisitions before I came to Sterling. You learn to spot buried clauses or you don't survive. Sorry the gala disappointed. For what it's worth, their loss. I'll prepare analysis for the Melbourne expansion and see you Monday at 9. Ryan. He hit send before he could reconsider, then immediately regretted the their loss comment. Too personal. Too familiar. Too much like he was thinking about her standing in front of that mirror looking uncertain. His phone buzzed 30 seconds later. Another text from the number he definitely hadn't saved. Their loss indeed, Mr. Hayes? See you Monday. Ryan stared at the message, at the small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, at the dangerous warmth spreading through his chest. This was how it started, he thought. This was how you stopped being careful, how you let someone pass the walls you'd built from grief and necessity, how you forgot that caring about people meant risking the kind of pain that could break you. He'd survived that pain once. Barely. Survived it by pouring everything into Chloe, into being the parent she deserved, into making sure his daughter never felt the absence of her mother as anything but love that continued beyond death. He couldn't afford to survive it again. But when Monday came and he knocked on Olivia Sterling's office door at exactly 9 a.m., when she looked up from her desk and smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes, Ryan realized something terrifying. He was going to try anyway, Monday morning arrived with the kind of confidence that came from pretending everything was normal. Ryan told himself the weekend had provided enough distance to reset whatever had happened Friday night. He'd spent Saturday at the Science Museum with Chloe, enduring her enthusiastic explanations of things he barely understood. Sunday had been laundry and groceries and the usual domestic rhythm that kept his life functional. He hadn't thought about Olivia Sterling at all. That was a lie, but he'd gotten good at lying to himself over the years. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt longer than usual. Ryan adjusted his tie twice, checked his phone for messages that hadn't arrived, and tried to ignore the fact that his palms were sweating like he was 16 again, waiting outside Sarah's dorm room before their first real date. This wasn't a date. This was a meeting, professional, strategic, completely devoid of the kind of implications that made his heart beat faster. Olivia's assistant, Jennifer, a woman in her 50s who'd been with the company since before Olivia was born, looked up from her desk with the kind of knowing smile that made Ryan immediately suspicious. "Mr. Hayes, she's expecting you. Coffee?" "I'm fine, thanks." "You look nervous." "I'm not nervous." Jennifer's smile widened. "Of course not. Why would you be nervous about a private meeting with one of the most powerful women in Chicago who apparently thinks you walk on water?" Ryan froze halfway to the door. "What?" "Oh, nothing. Just something she mentioned at the board meeting Friday afternoon. Something about how the Hendricks merger would have collapsed without your attention to detail." Jennifer examined her manicured nails. "Then she spent 20 minutes restructuring your compensation package. You're getting a raise, by the way. Substantial one." "I didn't ask for a raise." "No, but you earned one. She was very specific about that." Jennifer's expression softened slightly. "Ryan, I've worked for 3 generations of Sterlings. Olivia doesn't advocate for people unless she sees something exceptional. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Before he could respond, Olivia's door opened and she stood there, looking nothing like the uncertain woman from Thursday night. Today, she was all business. Tailored charcoal suit, hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose in a way that shouldn't have been attractive but absolutely was. "Ryan, come in." Her office smelled like coffee and the faint trace of her perfume. The morning light through those massive windows made the city look softer than it had any right to be. Olivia gestured to the conference table, already covered with documents, spreadsheets, and what looked like architectural renderings. "Melbourne expansion," she said, settling into a chair. "We've got 3 weeks to decide if we're pulling the trigger or walking away. Board split. My father thinks I'm being too aggressive. Half the executives think I'm not being aggressive enough." Ryan sat across from her, pulling the documents closer. "What do you think?" "I think Melbourne represents everything this company should be moving toward. Innovation, international presence, market diversification. I also think the risk assessment shows 17 different ways this could destroy us financially." "So you're conflicted." "I'm terrified." She said it simply, without embarrassment. "This is the first major expansion decision that's entirely mine. Not my father's legacy, not the board's consensus. Mine. And if I'm wrong, everyone who said I wasn't ready to run this company gets to say they told me so." Ryan studied the documents, his mind already cataloging variables and implications. This was where he felt comfortable. In data, in analysis, in problems that had solutions if you just worked hard enough. "What's the timeline on facility construction?" 18 months from groundbreaking to operational. "And the local regulatory approval process?" 6 to 9 months, depending on how friendly the city council feels. Ryan pulled out his laptop, opening the financial models he'd built over the weekend. Yes, he'd spent Sunday night running numbers instead of sleeping. No, he wasn't going to examine why. "Your risk assessment is missing 3 major factors," he said, turning the screen toward her. "Currency fluctuation over the construction period, the Australian tech labor shortage that's driving up staffing costs, and the fact that your primary competitor is already scouting the same market." Olivia leaned closer, studying his models. Close enough that he caught that perfume again, something clean and expensive that made him think of things he had no business thinking about in a professional setting. "How did you know about the competitor?" "LinkedIn stalking and industry newsletters. Their VP of operations has been hiring Australian consultants for 3 months. Either they're planning expansion or they're really committed to learning cricket." She laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polite sound she made in meetings, but something genuine. "Cricket. That's your competitive intelligence? I work with what I have. Olivia pulled the laptop closer, scrolling through his analysis. Her expression shifted from amused to focused, that sharp intelligence Ryan had always admired coming fully online. She was quiet for long enough that he started to worry he'd overstepped, pushed too hard, forgotten his place. This is brilliant, she said finally. It's just math. It's strategic thinking 3 steps ahead of where everyone else is looking. She met his eyes, and there was that intensity again, the kind that made him forget they were supposed to maintain professional distance. Why are you still just a project coordinator, Ryan? Because I'm good at it? You're good at everything you touch. You should be running departments, not supporting them. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. This conversation felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with career advancement. I like my current position. It's stable, predictable hours mostly. Good for Chloe's schedule. Something flickered across Olivia's face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. You turned down the promotion last year, Director of Strategic Operations. Marcus told me you declined without even considering it. Marcus has a big mouth. Marcus thinks you're wasting your potential because you're afraid. The words hit harder than they should have. Ryan stood, moving to the windows because sitting still suddenly felt impossible. Chicago sprawled below, indifferent to whatever personal drama played out 47 floors above its streets. I'm not afraid, he said quietly. I'm careful. There's a difference. Is there? When you're responsible for another human being who depends on you completely, yes, absolutely. He turned to face her. Director of Strategic Operations means 60-hour weeks, international travel, emergency calls at 3 a.m. It means missing Chloe's science fairs and parent-teacher conferences and the 1,000 small moments that make up her childhood. I already lost her mother. I won't let her lose me too. Olivia was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a gentleness he'd never heard before. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only thing I got right. I doubt that's true. Ryan returned to the table, needing to redirect this conversation before it went somewhere neither of them could walk back from. The Melbourne expansion. You want my honest opinion? Always. Do it, but not the way the board is proposing. He pulled up another document, one he'd drafted Saturday night while Chloe slept and the apartment was quiet enough to think. Staged implementation. Start with a strategic partnership with an existing Australian firm. Lower initial capital, faster market entry, local expertise. Use that to test demand and build relationships. Then, if the metrics support it, move to full facility construction in Phase 2. Olivia scanned his proposal, her expression unreadable. Ryan watched her think, watched the way her mind worked through implications and possibilities. He'd always found intelligence attractive. It was what had drawn him to Sarah, that brilliant, restless mind that never stopped questioning. But this was different. Sarah's intelligence had been academic, theoretical. Olivia's was practical, decisive, built for action rather than contemplation. The board will hate this, she said. Probably. My father will say it's too cautious. Definitely. Which means it's exactly right. She looked up, and her smile was pure victory. How fast can you put together a full presentation? 2 weeks if I do nothing else. 1 week if I ignore sleep. 1 week. I'll clear your calendar of everything non-essential. She stood, extending her hand. Partners on this? Ryan hesitated only a second before shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, and lasted just slightly longer than necessary. Partners. Over the next week, Ryan discovered what it meant to work directly with Olivia Sterling when she'd decided something mattered. She was relentless, emailing him at midnight with questions, calling him at 6 in the morning with ideas, showing up at his desk with coffee and corrections, and the kind of focused intensity that made everything else fade to background noise. They fell into a rhythm that felt natural, despite being completely unprecedented. Late evenings in her office, whiteboards covered with strategy sketches, arguments about methodology that got heated before resolving into something better than either of them had conceived alone. You're wrong about the timeline, Olivia said Thursday night, erasing his projected 18-month schedule. We can compress this to 14 if we overlap the regulatory approval with preliminary partnership negotiations. That's aggressive. That's ambitious. There's a difference. Ryan smiled, recognizing his own words thrown back at him. Ambitious gets you in trouble. Careful keeps you stuck. She tossed him the marker. Draw me a 14-month timeline that works. It's 9 p.m., Olivia. So? So I need to pick up Chloe from Mrs. Chen's in 30 minutes. Olivia set down her marker, and guilt flashed across her face. I'm sorry. I keep forgetting you have a whole life outside this building. Don't apologize. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to be. Why do you want to be? The question caught him off guard. Ryan could have deflected, could have said something about career development or professional growth. Instead, he found himself answering honestly. Because for the first time in 5 years, I feel like I'm building something that matters. Not just maintaining, not just surviving, actually creating something new. Olivia studied him with that unreadable expression she got sometimes, the one that made him wonder what she saw when she looked at him. You could have built something that mattered anywhere, Ryan. You chose to stay here, chose to stay in a position below your capabilities. Why? Maybe I was waiting for the right reason to try harder. And now you have one? He should have said the Melbourne expansion, should have made this about business, about professional ambition, about anything except the truth that sat between them like a live wire. Instead, Ryan gathered his papers and headed for the door. I should go? Chloe's probably convinced Mrs. Chen to let her watch educational videos about the universe's heat death again. That's a thing she does? Last week she spent 45 minutes explaining entropy to our neighbor's cat. Olivia laughed, and the sound followed him to the elevator, into his car, all the way home where Chloe was indeed lecturing Mrs. Chen about thermodynamics. Friday afternoon, Jennifer stopped him outside Olivia's office with an expression that meant trouble. She wants you to attend the Sterling family dinner tomorrow night. Ryan blinked. What? Monthly obligation. Her father, assorted relatives, business associates, usually terrible. Jennifer handed him an embossed invitation. She specifically requested you be there, said you're presenting the Melbourne proposal and need to meet the key stakeholders. On a Saturday? Welcome to how the Sterling family operates. Everything is business. Business is everything. Jennifer's expression softened. Fair warning, they're going to eat you alive. You're not from their world, you don't speak their language, and they're going to make sure you know it. Sounds fun. Bring your daughter if you need to. Olivia mentioned you might need childcare arrangements. Ryan looked at the invitation. Heavy cardstock, formal calligraphy, the kind of thing that costs more than most people spend on wedding invitations. The dinner was at the Sterling estate in Lake Forest. Black tie optional, which probably meant mandatory. He texted Marcus, "Do I own a tux?" The response came immediately. "You own one tie that isn't from Target. Why?" "Sterling family dinner tomorrow." "Holy shit. You're dead. Thanks for the support. Seriously, Ryan, that's not a dinner. It's a blood sport. They're going to ask about your pedigree, your education, your investment portfolio. And when they find out you're just a regular person who works for a living, they're going to destroy you." Ryan stared at his phone, then at the invitation, then at Olivia's closed office door. He could decline, could make an excuse about Chloe, about prior commitments, about anything that let him maintain the distance that was rapidly dissolving. He knocked on her door instead. "Come in." Olivia sat at her desk, reviewing contracts with the kind of focus that made her miss his entrance. Ryan waited, studying the office he'd spent so much time in lately. It still looked impersonal. No photos, no mementos, nothing that revealed who she was beneath the CEO exterior. "The dinner invitation," he said. She looked up and something like anxiety crossed her face. "Jennifer told you. Is this really necessary?" "Yes." She set down her pen. "The board votes on Melbourne in 3 weeks. Half of them will be at this dinner, along with my father's closest advisors. You need to sell them on this proposal before the official presentation, or they'll dismiss it out of hand." "They're going to dismiss me out of hand." "Probably." She stood, moving around the desk. "They're snobs, Ryan. Old money, old ideas, old prejudices. But they're also not stupid. If you show them the same analysis you showed me, if you prove you understand the business better than they do, they'll listen. And if they don't? Then I override them and do it anyway." She smiled slightly. "Perks of being CEO." Ryan turned the invitation over in his hands. "What's the dress code, really?" "Expensive, uncomfortable clothes designed to make everyone except the wealthy feel inadequate." "I don't own expensive, uncomfortable clothes." I know. Olivia pulled out her phone, typing something quickly. Marcus's number is still the same? Why? Because he's taking you shopping tomorrow morning. My treat. I can't let you buy me a tux. It's not a gift. It's a business expense. Consider it part of the Melbourne project budget. She met his eyes, and her expression turned serious. I know I'm asking a lot. I know this isn't part of your job description. But I need you there, Ryan. Not just for the proposal. I need someone in that room who isn't performing, who doesn't have an agenda, who'll tell me the truth when everyone else is lying. The vulnerability in her voice reminded him of that night a week ago, standing in this same office while she asked if she looked good in a dress, like she was showing him something real beneath the armor, trusting him with pieces of herself she didn't share freely. Chloe's coming with me, he said. Olivia blinked. What? If I'm doing this, my daughter comes. Non-negotiable. Ryan, it's a formal dinner with people who will judge me regardless of what I wear or say or do. At least if Chloe's there, I have a reason to leave when it gets unbearable. He crossed his arms. Also, she's smarter than half your board members and more honest than all of them. Might be refreshing. Olivia laughed, that real laugh again, the one he was starting to collect like currency. Fine, bring Chloe. But if she starts explaining entropy to my father, I'm not responsible for the consequences. Deal. Saturday morning found Ryan in a boutique men's store that smelled like leather and money, watching Marcus hold up jackets that cost more than his monthly rent. This one, Marcus said, pulling out a midnight blue tuxedo. Classic, elegant, says, I belong here, without trying too hard. It's $1,500. It's Olivia's $1,500. Try it on. The tuxedo fit perfectly, which Ryan suspected wasn't an accident. The tailor made minor adjustments, talking about break lines and sleeve pitch in a language Ryan didn't speak. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. You look terrified, Marcus observed. I feel like I'm playing dress-up for a world I don't belong in. That's because you are. Marcus adjusted Ryan's bow tie. But here's the thing, none of them belong there either. They're all just better at pretending. Old money doesn't make you special, Ryan. It just gives you practice at lying about who you are. Comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you, I'm trying to prepare you. Marcus met his eyes in the mirror. These people are going to look at you and see everything you're not. Wrong background, wrong education, wrong tax bracket. They're going to try to make you feel small. And don't let them. You're smarter than most of them. You work harder than all of them. And you've earned every single thing you have. They were born on third base and think they hit a triple. You actually built something from nothing. Ryan thought about Chloe, about the life he'd constructed from the wreckage of Sarah's death, about nights when he'd rocked a crying infant while researching formula brands and safe sleep practices on his phone, about learning to braid hair from YouTube videos and attending daddy-daughter dance classes and becoming both parents because the alternative was failing the one person who mattered most. You're right, he said quietly. I know. I'm always right. It's my best quality. Marcus grinned. Now, let's get you some shoes that don't look like you bought them at a discount store. That evening, Ryan stood in front of his bathroom mirror wearing the most expensive clothes he'd ever owned, trying to convince himself he could do this. Chloe appeared in the doorway wearing the purple dress she'd picked out for her school's holiday concert. Slightly too fancy for a 7-year-old, but absolutely perfect for her personality. Dad, you look like a spy. I feel like an imposter. That's the same thing. Spies are professional imposters. She examined him critically. You need different shoes. These are new shoes. They're shiny. Spy shoes should be matte finish for stealth operations. Ryan laughed, crouching to her level. Listen, princess, this dinner is going to be weird. Lots of rich people talking about boring things. If you want to leave at any point, just say the word and we're gone. Are there going to be other kids? Probably not. Good. Kids my age are mostly interested in things that don't matter. Chloe. What? It's true. Tommy Martinez thinks dinosaurs could teleport. That's not someone I need to network with. We're not networking, we're surviving. Same thing in capitalism, Dad. Ryan had no idea where she learned these things. Actually, he knew exactly where. From him, from the conversations he had with Marcus that she overheard, from being raised by a single parent who sometimes forgot to filter his cynicism around small ears. They drove to Lake Forest in Ryan's aging Honda, which looked increasingly out of place as they passed through gates and up a private drive lined with cars that cost more than his annual salary. The Sterling estate was exactly what he'd expected: old money in architectural form, sprawling and elegant and absolutely intimidating. A valet took his keys with the kind of professional courtesy that didn't quite hide his judgment of the car. Ryan held Chloe's hand as they walked toward the entrance, her small fingers gripping his tightly. "You okay?" he asked. "Their house is bigger than our apartment building. Money doesn't buy happiness, remember? But it apparently buys really big houses." The entrance hall was all marble and chandeliers, and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. A server in formal attire directed them to the main parlor, where approximately 30 people mingled with champagne and conversation. Ryan spotted Olivia immediately. She wore emerald green tonight, something elegant that made her look like she'd been born to this world. She was talking to an older man who had to be her father. Same sharp features, same presence, but harder somehow, colder. Then Olivia saw them, and her expression transformed. She excused herself and crossed the room, moving with purpose. "You came." "I said I would." "I know, but I half expected you to wise up and run." Her eyes dropped to Chloe. "And you must be the famous scientist I've heard so much about." Chloe looked up at Olivia with the kind of serious evaluation she usually reserved for scientific equipment. "Dad says you run a company." "I do." "What's your profit margin?" Ryan nearly choked. "Chloe." "It's a reasonable question," Olivia said, crouching to Chloe's level. "Last quarter we ran 11%, which is decent, but not spectacular. I'm working on improving operational efficiency." "Have you considered vertical integration to reduce supply chain costs?" Olivia blinked, then laughed. "Actually, yes. We're exploring that in the Melbourne expansion." "Smart." Chloe nodded approvingly. "I like you. You're not condescending." "I like you too. You ask better questions than most of my board members." "That's a low bar, statistically speaking." Ryan watched them talk, watched his daughter engage with Olivia like they were colleagues rather than adult and child, and something in his chest tightened. This wasn't supposed to happen. Wasn't supposed to feel natural or right or like a glimpse of something he hadn't let himself want in 5 years. "Olivia." The older man approached, his expression neutral, but his eyes calculating. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" "Father, this is Ryan Hayes, the senior project coordinator I've been telling you about. Ryan, my father, Harrison Sterling." Harrison's handshake was firm, performative. "The Melbourne proposal. Olivia speaks highly of your work." "Thank you, sir. Though I understand you've advised a more cautious approach than our board recommended." "Not cautious, strategic. There's a difference." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Ryan felt Chloe squeeze his hand, her way of saying she was proud of him for not backing down. "We'll see how strategic it looks when you present to the full board." Harrison's attention shifted to Chloe. "And who is this?" "My daughter, Chloe." "Charming." The word carried no warmth. "I wasn't aware this was a family event." "I invited them both," Olivia said, her voice cool. "Chloe's welcome here." The tension crackling between father and daughter was almost visible. Harrison smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, and excused himself to greet other guests. "I'm sorry," Olivia said quietly. "Don't be. I expected worse. The night's young." She wasn't wrong. Over dinner, a formal affair with multiple courses and more silverware than any reasonable meal required. Ryan fielded questions that ranged from professionally curious to actively hostile. Where had he studied? State school? What did his family do? His father had been a mechanic. Did he have investment experience? Only in the sense that he'd successfully maintained a 401k. Each answer seemed to confirm their suspicions that he didn't belong. Chloe sat beside him, eating with surprising manners and occasionally interjecting with observations that made the adults uncomfortable. "The wealth disparity in this room could fund multiple school districts," she noted during the second course. Ryan kicked her gently under the table. She kicked back. Olivia, seated across from them, caught his eye and smiled. Not the professional smile she gave everyone else, but something warmer, something that said, "We're surviving this together." After dinner, while the adults migrated to the library for brandy and business discussion, Ryan found Chloe in the estate's impressive library, reading a first edition of something that probably cost more than their rent. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think these people have more money than sense." She closed the book carefully. But I like Olivia. She's smart, and she doesn't pretend to be something she's not. No, she doesn't. Do you like her? The question was innocent, curious, completely devastating. Ryan sat beside his daughter, trying to figure out how to answer honestly without revealing too much. She's my boss, princess. That's not what I asked. What did you ask? Do you like her the way you liked Mom? Ryan's breath caught. Chloe almost never brought up Sarah in contexts like this, as a person her father had loved rather than as a concept she'd inherited. The question felt dangerous, like walking on ice you weren't sure would hold. Nobody's like Mom, he said carefully. I know, but do you like her anyway? Before Ryan could answer, Olivia appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt. Ryan, they're asking for you in the library. Something about defending your proposal against my father's objections. Of course they are. He stood, then hesitated. Chloe, go. I'll be fine. There's like 6,000 books here, and most of them aren't even about dinosaurs with teleportation powers. Olivia laughed. If you want, the third shelf has a collection on astrophysics that might interest you. Really? Chloe's eyes lit up. Can I? Read anything you want. Ryan followed Olivia to the library where a dozen men in expensive suits looked at him like a specimen under glass. Harrison Sterling stood by the fireplace, holding court. Ah, Mr. Hayes, we were just discussing your Melbourne proposal. Perhaps you could explain why you believe timidity serves us better than ambition? This was the test, Ryan realized, the real reason he'd been invited. Not to network, not to socialize, but to prove whether he could hold his ground against people who'd spent lifetimes wielding power. He thought about Chloe in the other room, about the life he'd built from nothing, about every time someone had underestimated him and he'd proven them wrong. With respect, Mr. Sterling, I don't believe in timidity. I believe in sustainable growth over reckless expansion. Your board's original proposal assumes best-case scenarios across 15 different variables. My approach accounts for reality, market volatility, regulatory challenges, competitive responses. It's not timid. It's smart. Harrison's expression didn't change. And if we disagree, then you'll make a mistake that costs shareholders millions and proves your daughter right about needing new leadership. The room went silent. Ryan had just committed career suicide, and he knew it. But something about these people, their arrogance, their assumption that money equaled intelligence, made him incapable of playing safe. Then Harrison Sterling smiled. Actually smiled. Olivia, you were right about him. He's got spine. He turned to the others. Perhaps we should give this proposal the serious consideration it deserves. The meeting dissolved into actual discussion, questions, concerns, strategic debate rather than performance. Ryan answered everything they threw at him, backed by data and analysis and the kind of preparation that came from genuinely caring about the outcome. When it ended 2 hours later, he felt wrung out, exhausted, and strangely exhilarated. Olivia caught up with him in the hallway. That was incredible. That was terrifying. You stood up to my father. Nobody does that. I might have just ended my career. You might have just saved the Melbourne expansion. She touched his arm lightly. Thank you for being here, for fighting for this, for being exactly who you are instead of who they expected. Ryan looked at her hand on his arm, at the warmth in her eyes, at the woman who was supposed to be just his boss but had somehow become something more complicated. Chloe asked if I liked you, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. What did you tell her? I didn't get the chance. Olivia's expression shifted through several emotions too fast to name. And if you had the chance, what would you say? This was the moment. The place where honesty could change everything or destroy it completely. Ryan thought about his carefully constructed life, about the walls he'd built, about the promise he'd made to himself that Chloe would always come first. Then he thought about how Olivia had looked at his daughter tonight, with genuine interest, with respect, with warmth that wasn't performed. I'd say, Dad! Chloe ran down the hall, clutching a book. Olivia said I could borrow this. It's about exoplanets, and it has pictures and everything. The moment shattered, but maybe that was better. Maybe some truths needed more time, more certainty, more courage than either of them had found yet. That's great, Princess. Ryan took the book, then looked at Olivia. Thank you for everything tonight. You're welcome. Her voice carried something unspoken. See you Monday? Monday. They drove home through the quiet suburbs, Chloe chattering about exoplanets and first editions, and how Olivia's library was better than the school's, but not better than the public downtown branch because diversity of selection mattered more than expensive binding. Ryan half listened, his mind replaying the evening, replaying that moment in the hallway, replaying the question he hadn't answered. His phone buzzed at a red light, a text from Olivia. "Your daughter is remarkable. You're doing something very right." He typed back, "She likes you. That's not common. The feeling is mutual." Ryan stared at those 3 words, at the implications rippling beneath them, at the dangerous territory they were both approaching without acknowledging it directly. Another text arrived. "What were you going to say?" In the hallway, before Chloe interrupted, his fingers hovered over the keyboard. Truth or safety? Honesty or survival? The choice felt enormous, like choosing a direction that would determine every step after. I was going to say yes. I like you, more than I should. The response took longer this time. Ryan watched the dots appear and disappear 3 times. Finally, good, because I like you too, and I have no idea what to do about it. Neither do I. Monday, we pretend this conversation didn't happen. Monday, we pretend a lot of things didn't happen. Sounds like a plan. But Monday came, and pretending proved impossible. Because somewhere between a late-night question about a dress and a family dinner that felt like battle, something had shifted between them that couldn't be shifted back. They'd stopped being boss and employee, stopped being acquaintances, stopped being safe. They'd become something neither of them had a name for yet, but both of them could feel building like a storm on the horizon, inevitable, powerful, and absolutely terrifying. The Melbourne presentation went better than Ryan had any right to expect. The board asked hard questions. Harrison Sterling played devil's advocate with the enthusiasm of someone who enjoyed watching people squirm, but in the end they approved the staged implementation approach by a vote of 8-3. Olivia caught his eye across the boardroom table when the final vote came through, and her smile was pure triumph mixed with something else. Something that made Ryan's chest tight in a way he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. Afterward, in the hallway outside the boardroom, she grabbed his arm and pulled him into an empty office. "We did it." "You did it," Ryan corrected. "I just provided the numbers. You provided the strategy, the vision, the backbone to stand up to them when they tried to tear it apart." She was standing too close, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Olivia, I know. I know we're not supposed to acknowledge whatever this is. But right now, in this moment, I need you to know that you matter. Not just as an employee, as..." Her phone rang, shattering the moment. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted to something Ryan couldn't read. "I have to take this, the Singapore investors." She squeezed his hand once, quickly, then stepped away. "Dinner tonight? To celebrate?" "I can't. Chloe's school thing." "Right. Of course." But something flickered across her face, disappointment maybe, or hurt. "Tomorrow then?" "Tomorrow." Except tomorrow came with its own crisis. The Hendricks merger that had seemed so solid started showing cracks when their CFO was arrested for embezzlement. By Wednesday, Sterling Industries was in damage control mode, and Ryan found himself working 18-hour days trying to salvage what he could from the wreckage. He barely saw Chloe. Mrs. Chen picked her up from school, fed her dinner, helped with homework. Ryan would stumble home around 11, find his daughter asleep, and feel the familiar weight of failing at the one thing that actually mattered. Thursday night, he made it home by 9, found Chloe still awake, and she looked at him with an expression that reminded him painfully of Sarah. "You're always gone now." "I know, princess. I'm sorry. Work is always something." She pulled her knees to her chest. "You missed my presentation on planetary formation. Mrs. Patterson said it was the best one in class, and you weren't there to see it." The guilt hit like a physical thing. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "You would have known if you'd been at the parent meeting last week. Or if you'd read the email Mrs. Patterson sent. Or if you'd asked me about school instead of just saying, 'That's great,' when I talk." Her voice cracked. "I know your job is important. I know we need the money. But I need you too." Ryan sat beside her, feeling like the worst father in the world. "You're right. Completely right. I've been so focused on this merger and the Melbourne project that I lost track of what matters." "Do you like her?" The question came out of nowhere. Ryan blinked. Who? Olivia, your boss, the one you're always texting and calling and staying late with. It's not like that. Then what's it like? Chloe looked at him with eyes too old for 7. Because you smile different when you talk about her, the way you used to smile in pictures with Mom. Ryan had no idea what to say to that. How to explain something he barely understood himself. How to tell his daughter that yes, he was developing feelings for someone, and yes, it terrified him, and no, he didn't know what to do about any of it. Work is complicated right now, he said finally. That's not an answer. I know. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed in a way that sounded far too adult. Just don't forget about me while you figure it out. Never. Chloe, you are the most important thing in my life, always. Nothing changes that. Then prove it. The words haunted him through the weekend. Haunted him Monday morning when Olivia called him into her office and he saw the dark circles under her eyes that matched his own. The Hendricks situation is worse than we thought, she said without preamble. Their entire financial structure might be compromised. We're looking at potential losses in the tens of millions if we don't walk away clean. Walk away how? Terminate the merger. Cut our losses. She rubbed her temples. The board meets Friday to vote. They're going to want someone to blame, and right now the easiest target is the person who recommended we proceed, you. Ryan felt the ground shift under him. I vetted their financials. Everything looked solid. It was solid. Their CFO was just better at hiding things than we were at finding them. She met his eyes. I'm not throwing you under the bus, Ryan. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, I'll make it clear this wasn't your fault. But the board might not care about fault versus bad luck. They might decide a reorganization is necessary. New leadership, new team, new direction. You mean they'll fire me? I mean they'll try, and I'll fight them. But I can't promise I'll win. Ryan thought about his apartment, about Chloe's school tuition, about the carefully balanced budget that worked only because he had steady employment. Thought about how long it would take to find another job at this salary level, whether he could survive the gap, what it would mean to uproot his daughter's life. How bad is it really? Olivia's expression told him everything. Bad enough that I spent the weekend reviewing every decision I've made since taking over this company, wondering where I went wrong. You didn't go wrong. You trusted data that was falsified. I trusted my judgment, trusted that I could see the truth beneath the numbers. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father called Sunday. Wanted to know if I was ready to admit I wasn't ready for this position. What did you tell him? I hung up on him. She stood, moving to the windows. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I deserve this. That I'm not just Harrison Sterling's daughter playing CEO. That I actually have the intelligence and vision to run this company better than he ever did. And now you're human. You made a decision based on the best information available. That's not failure, Olivia. That's just reality. She turned to face him. Is that what you tell yourself when Chloe looks at you like she's disappointed? The observation hit too close. Ryan looked away. How did you? Because I see it in your eyes lately. Guilt. Like you're failing at something that matters more than work. She crossed her arms. What happened? He should have deflected. Should have maintained professional distance. Instead, he found himself telling her about Chloe's presentation, about missing parent meetings, about his daughter asking if he liked Olivia, and whether he was forgetting about her. She's right, he said quietly. I've been so caught up in Melbourne and Hendricks and everything happening here that I've been a terrible father. You're not terrible. You're stretched too thin. Same thing in practice. Olivia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight Ryan hadn't heard before. I used to have a younger brother. Did you know that? He shook his head. Daniel. He died when I was 16, car accident. She stared out the window. I was supposed to drive him to soccer practice that day, but I had a debate tournament. Told my mom he could catch a ride with someone else. Didn't think twice about it. Olivia, the other parent who drove, was texting, ran a red light. Daniel died instantly. Her voice was flat, controlled. My father never said it was my fault, didn't have to. I knew. If I'd prioritized differently, if I'd chosen my brother over my ambition, he'd still be alive. Ryan moved to stand beside her. That's not fair to yourself, isn't it? I made a choice about what mattered more, and I've been living with that choice ever since. She looked at him. Don't make the same mistake I did, Ryan. Don't sacrifice the people you love for a job that will replace you the second you become inconvenient. Is that what you think this company would do to you? I know it's what they do. The only question is when. They stood there in silence, two people carrying guilt too heavy to name, and Ryan realized something that should have been obvious weeks ago. They were both running from things they couldn't outpace, both trying to prove something to people who would never be satisfied, both terrified of admitting they needed something more than success. I should get back to work, he said. Ryan. She caught his arm. Whatever happens Friday, whatever the board decides, I want you to know that working with you these past months has been the first time I felt like I wasn't alone in this, like someone actually understood what I was trying to build. I understand. I know you do. That's the problem. He knew what she meant. Understanding led to connection. Connection led to caring, and caring led to the kind of vulnerability neither of them could afford. Ryan pulled away gently. I'll have the Hendricks exit strategy on your desk by tomorrow morning. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because giving up isn't in my vocabulary, even when maybe it should be. He worked through the night, building contingency plans and exit strategies and damage control protocols. Worked through Wednesday through Thursday, barely sleeping, barely eating, running on coffee, and stubborn refusal to fail. Friday morning arrived with the kind of dread that came from knowing the axe was falling, but not knowing where it would land. The board meeting started at 9. Ryan wasn't invited, wasn't even supposed to know what was being discussed, but Marcus texted him updates. They're going after Olivia hard. Her father's leading the charge. 3 board members just called for her resignation. She's fighting back. You should see her. Vote's happening now. Ryan stared at his phone, willing it to buzz with good news. When it finally did, the message made his stomach drop. She survived. Barely. 6-5 vote of confidence, but there's conditions. Major reorganization, staff cuts, they're demanding blood. An hour later, Olivia's assistant called him to her office. Ryan climbed those stairs feeling like he was walking to an execution. His own, probably. The board needed scapegoats, and he was the easiest target. Olivia sat at her desk, looking like she'd aged 10 years in a week. The victory in her eyes from the Melbourne approval was gone, replaced with something harder. Something that looked like survival at a cost. They're making me restructure, she said without preamble. Cut 15% of the workforce, eliminate redundant positions, streamline operations. I understand. I had to make choices, Ryan. Impossible choices about who stays and who goes. His heart was pounding. And I need you to understand that this isn't personal. It's not about your value or your work. You've been exceptional, better than exceptional. But the board is demanding senior-level cuts, and your position is vulnerable because I'm the one who recommended the Hendricks merger. Because you're the person I've been working most closely with, and they see that as a liability. She stood, and he could see her hands shaking. They think I've lost objectivity, that I'm making decisions based on personal feelings rather than business sense. Have you? The question hung between them, dangerous and necessary. Olivia looked at him with something like pain. I don't know anymore. I don't know where the line is between respecting someone professionally and... She stopped. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I have to make a decision that protects the company. You're firing me. I'm transferring you to the Singapore office, Senior Director of Asian Operations. It's a promotion, Ryan. Better salary, better title, better opportunities. The words hit like bullets. Singapore. Halfway around the world. Away from everything Chloe knew, from her school, from Mrs. Chen, from the life he'd carefully built in the wreckage of Sarah's death. I can't go to Singapore. I know. Olivia's voice cracked. I know you can't uproot Chloe like that, which means you'll refuse the transfer, which gives you grounds for a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, full benefits, excellent references. Ryan understood then. This was her way of protecting him, of giving him resources while removing the target the board had painted on his back. It was strategic, practical, and completely devastating. You're choosing the company over what? Over a relationship we've never even acknowledged exists? She looked away. I'm choosing survival, for both of us. If I fight the board on this, I lose what's left of their confidence. And if I lose that, I lose everything, and then I can't protect anyone. So you're protecting yourself. I'm protecting what I can. Her eyes met his, and they were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. This is who I am, Ryan. This is what I warned you about. I will always choose this company, this position, this life, because it's all I have, all I know how to be. Ryan thought about Chloe asking if he was forgetting about her, thought about missing her presentation, about the promises he'd made to himself about being the parent she deserved, thought about how close he'd come to sacrificing that for something that was never going to work anyway. You're right, he said quietly. This is who you are. Ryan, no, I mean it. You're the person who will always choose work over people, success over connection, safety over risk. He moved toward the door. I don't blame you for that. I understand it. But I can't be around it either. Where will you go? I don't know. Find another job. Take some time with Chloe. Figure out how to be a better father than I've been lately. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, you would have been worth the risk if you'd been brave enough to take it, and you would have been worth fighting for if you'd asked me to. The admission hung in the air between them, too late and too honest. Ryan wanted to go back, wanted to say the things they'd both been avoiding, wanted to fight for something that felt real in a way nothing else had since Sarah died. But Chloe's face flashed in his mind. Her disappointment, her fear that he was forgetting about her, her need for a father who actually showed up. Goodbye, Olivia. Goodbye, Ryan. He left Sterling Industries that afternoon with a box of personal items and a severance package that felt like payment for silence. Marcus caught him at the elevator, looking stricken. Man, I'm sorry. I didn't think she'd actually do it. She did what she had to do. That's bullshit, and you know it. She had choices. She chose wrong. Ryan shook his head. She chose survival. Can't fault someone for that. The apartment felt too quiet when he got home at 3 p.m. on a Friday, hours earlier than Chloe would expect him. He unpacked the box. A coffee mug, some photos, the exoplanet book Chloe had borrowed from Olivia and forgotten to return. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, except he knew exactly who it was. I'm sorry. Ryan stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it without responding, deleted her contact information, and tried to convince himself this was better, cleaner. An ending that let both of them move forward without the mess of what might have been. He picked up Chloe from school himself for the first time in weeks. She looked surprised to see him, then cautious. Did you get fired? Sort of. It's complicated. Are we going to be okay? Yes. Absolutely yes. He took her hand. And I'm going to be around a lot more now. No more missing presentations or parent meetings. No more being gone all the time. What about Olivia? What about her? Are you still going to see her? Ryan's throat tightened. No, princess. That's over. Chloe was quiet for a moment. Did she hurt you? It's complicated. Adults always say that when things are actually simple but painful. She was right, of course. It was simple. Olivia had chosen her company, and he'd chosen his daughter, and those choices were incompatible. The pain didn't make it complicated, just hard. That night, Ryan started job hunting with a determination born from necessity. But the market was tighter than he'd hoped, and his specific skill set was valuable but not immediately transferable. Days turned into a week, then 2, and the severance package that had seemed generous started looking finite. He cut expenses, stopped ordering takeout, made Chloe's lunches instead of giving her money for the cafeteria. She didn't complain, just adjusted with the kind of resilience that made him proud and guilty in equal measure. 3 weeks after leaving Sterling Industries, his phone rang at 2 p.m. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but unemployment had made him less selective. Mr. Hayes, this is Carol Mitchell from Westbrook Elementary. His blood went cold. Is Chloe okay? She collapsed during recess. We've called an ambulance. They're taking her to Chicago Memorial. The rest of the conversation disappeared into white noise. Ryan was already moving, grabbing his keys, his phone, running for the car. His hand shook so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive to the hospital was a blur of traffic and panic and prayers to nobody in particular because he'd stopped believing in anything except Chloe years ago. She was fine. She had to be fine. Because the alternative was unthinkable, was the nightmare that woke him at 3 a.m., was losing the only thing left in the world that mattered. Chicago Memorial's emergency entrance was chaos. Ambulances, people, noise that barely registered. Ryan burst through the doors, gave Chloe's name to 3 different people, followed a nurse down hallways that all looked the same. They'd put her in a curtained area, small and pale, on a bed too big for her. She was conscious, which made breathing possible again, but scared in a way he'd never seen. "Dad? I'm here, Princess. I'm right here." He took her hand, feeling how small it was, how fragile. "What happened?" "I don't know. I was playing, and then everything got dizzy, and then I woke up here." A doctor appeared, young, efficient, carrying a tablet. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Dr. Patel. We're running tests now, but Chloe's vitals are stable. Can you tell me if she's been sick recently? Any symptoms we should know about?" Ryan's mind raced back through the past weeks. Had she been tired? Complained about anything? He'd been so focused on job hunting, on managing their new financial reality, on his own mess of emotions about Olivia, that he hadn't been paying attention. "She seemed fine, maybe more tired than usual, but I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought it was just school stress. We're going to do a full workup, blood tests, possibly imaging. It might take a few hours." Hours. Ryan nodded, not trusting his voice. The doctor left, and he sat beside Chloe's bed, holding her hand like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly tilted sideways. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. Me too." "Are you going to leave?" "Never. Not for anything. I'm staying right here until we figure this out." She nodded, seeming reassured. They sat in silence, listening to the hospital sounds. Monitors beeping, voices in other rooms, the PA system calling for doctors. Ryan's phone buzzed. Marcus checking in about a job lead. He ignored it. Another buzz. A recruiter. Ignored. A third buzz. He glanced at the screen and his breath caught. "I heard. I'm coming. Olivia." Somehow she'd found out. Somehow she was on her way. And despite everything, the anger, the hurt, the careful distance he'd been maintaining, Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. Because whatever else was true, whatever had broken between them, she was coming. And right now, sitting in this hospital room watching his daughter fight to stay brave, he needed someone who understood what it felt like when the ground disappeared beneath you. He needed someone who'd fought their own battles with loss and guilt and fear. He needed her. 20 minutes later, Olivia Sterling walked through the emergency room doors like she belonged there, like hospitals and crisis were just another board meeting to navigate. But when her eyes found his, when she saw him sitting beside Chloe's bed looking like his world was ending, the corporate armor cracked. She crossed the room without hesitation, without asking permission, and sat in the chair beside him. "What do we know?" Not, "What do you know?" We. Like they were still a team. Like the past 3 weeks hadn't happened. Collapsed at school. They're running tests. Could be hours before we know anything. Then we wait. Chloe opened her eyes, focusing on Olivia. "You came." "Of course I came." Olivia's voice was gentle in a way Ryan had only heard her use with his daughter. "How are you feeling?" "Scared. But better now that Dad's here. And you." Something passed across Olivia's face. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude for being included in that statement. She reached out, brushing hair from Chloe's forehead with a tenderness that made Ryan's throat tight. "You're going to be fine. You're the smartest 7-year-old I've ever met. Your body wouldn't dare malfunction." Chloe smiled weakly. "That's not how biology works." "Then biology better learn who it's dealing with." The hours crawled past. Nurses came and went, taking blood, checking vitals, asking questions. Dr. Patel returned twice with updates that weren't really updates. Still waiting on tests, still monitoring, still uncertain. Ryan sat frozen in that chair, watching his daughter sleep between examinations, and felt every mistake of the past months press down on him. He'd been so focused on work, on Olivia, on proving something to people who didn't matter, that he'd missed signs, missed moments, missed being the father Chloe needed. "Stop," Olivia said quietly. "Stop what?" "Blaming yourself. I can see it all over your face. You don't know what I'm thinking. You're thinking this is somehow your fault, that if you'd been more present, more attentive, you would have caught whatever this is earlier." She met his eyes. And you're wrong. You're a good father, Ryan. The best. Chloe knows that. She told me. When? The night of the dinner. While you were being interrogated by my father's cronies, we talked. She told me how you learned to braid her hair from YouTube videos, how you read her astronomy articles before bed, how you make her laugh when she's sad about not having a mother. Olivia's voice softened. She worships you. And nothing that's happening right now changes the fact that you've given her an incredible life. Ryan felt tears threatening and pushed them back. I should have noticed something was wrong. Maybe. Or maybe some things happen regardless of how vigilant we are, regardless of how much we love someone or how hard we try to protect them. He knew she was thinking about her brother, about the guilt she carried, the what-ifs that never led anywhere except circles of blame. I'm sorry, he said, about how I left things, what I said. You were right, about all of it. Olivia leaned back, exhausted. I chose survival over taking a risk, chose the safe path, and I've been miserable ever since. Olivia, I resigned. The words hit like a bomb. Ryan stared at her. What? Tuesday. Gave the board my resignation, effective in 2 weeks. Told them to find someone else who'd tolerate their manipulation and compromise. Why? Because you were right about something else, too. I would have been worth the risk, and so would you. And I was too scared to admit that until it was too late. She smiled sadly. Turns out losing someone because you weren't brave enough hurts worse than getting fired. Ryan didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process the fact that Olivia Sterling, the woman who'd built her entire identity around that company, had walked away. For what? For him? For the possibility of something they'd never even properly started? Before he could respond, Dr. Patel returned, her expression carefully neutral in a way that made Ryan's stomach drop. We have the results. The world narrowed to those 4 words. Ryan stood, reaching for Chloe's hand even though she was still sleeping. And? Chloe has severe anemia. Her iron levels are critically low, which caused the fainting episode. Dr. Patel pulled up results on her tablet. The good news is this is very treatable. Iron supplements, dietary changes, and monitoring should resolve it completely. Relief hit so hard Ryan had to sit down. Not cancer. Not a brain tumor, not any of the 1,000 terrible possibilities that had been running through his mind for hours. She's going to be okay? She's going to be fine. We'll keep her overnight for observation and to start treatment. But this is manageable, Mr. Hayes. Ryan dropped his head into his hands, letting the tension of the past hours finally release. He felt Olivia's hand on his back, gentle and grounding. See, she said quietly, biology knew who it was dealing with. Chloe woke up 20 minutes later to find both of them still there. She looked at Ryan, then at Olivia, then back at Ryan with an expression far too knowing for 7 years old. You're both here. We're both here, Ryan confirmed. Good, because I've been thinking. She struggled to sit up, and Olivia helped adjust her pillows. Life is too short for adults to be stupid about feelings. Chloe, no, listen, Mom died and you were sad forever. But you're not sad when you talk about Olivia. You're happy, and Olivia looks at you the way people look at things they want but think they can't have. She crossed her arms. It's dumb. You both have feelings. You should just admit it instead of making everything complicated. Ryan stared at his daughter. Did you hit your head when you fainted? No, I achieved clarity. There's a difference. She looked at Olivia. Do you like my dad? Olivia didn't hesitate. Yes. And Dad, do you like Olivia? Chloe, this isn't... Do you? Ryan looked at Olivia, at the woman who'd walked away from everything she'd built, who'd shown up at a hospital without being asked, who was sitting in an uncomfortable chair looking at him like the answer actually mattered. Yes. Then stop being scared and do something about it. Chloe settled back against her pillows. I'm 7, and I figured this out. You're adults. Act like it. Silence filled the small room. Ryan felt like he'd been called out by the world's smallest therapist, and she wasn't wrong. She makes good points, Olivia said carefully. She usually does, though her timing could use work. Also typical. Olivia stood, moving closer to Ryan's chair. I'm terrified of this. Of us. Of everything it could mean and everything it could cost. Me too. but I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Ryan reached for her hand, feeling how perfectly it fit in his. What if we mess this up? What if it doesn't work and we both end up hurt? Then at least we'll know we tried. She squeezed his hand. I'm done choosing safety over possibility, Ryan. Done letting fear make my decisions. If you're willing to risk it, so am I. He thought about Sarah, about the years of grief and careful survival. Thought about the walls he'd built and the life he'd constructed in their shadow. Thought about his daughter, watching them with hope in her eyes, asking him to be brave. Okay, he said quietly. Let's try. Olivia smiled, that real smile that reached her eyes, and leaned down to kiss his forehead. It was gentle, brief, and felt like a promise. Okay. Chloe made a satisfied sound. Finally. Now can someone get me juice? Almost dying makes you thirsty. You didn't almost die, Ryan said. I could have, dramatically, which means I've earned juice. Olivia laughed, the sound bright in the sterile hospital room, and went to find a nurse. Ryan sat beside his daughter, holding her hand, and felt something shift in his chest. The weight he'd been carrying for 5 years, the guilt, the fear, the certainty that he didn't deserve happiness again, lightened just enough to let him breathe. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. They still had to figure out what this meant, how to navigate a relationship neither of them had planned for, how to build something real from the wreckage of professional boundaries and emotional distance. But for the first time since Sarah died, Ryan felt like maybe it was possible. Maybe being happy again didn't mean forgetting. Maybe letting someone in didn't mean risking everything. Maybe love, in whatever form it took, was worth being afraid for. The hospital released Chloe the next morning with strict instructions about iron supplements, dietary changes, and follow-up appointments. Ryan carried her prescription papers and a list of iron-rich foods that read like a punishment: liver, spinach, beans, while Chloe made a face that suggested she'd rather faint again than eat any of it. Can't I just take pills? She asked as Ryan buckled her into the car. Pills and food, doctor's orders. What if I become a breatharian? They only eat air and sunlight. You're 7, not a plant. Science doesn't limit based on age, Dad. Olivia, who'd stayed the entire night despite Ryan's protests that she should go home, leaned against her car in the parking lot. She looked exhausted, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair falling out of its usual perfect arrangement. She'd never looked more human. I should let you get her home, Olivia said. Ryan hesitated, keys in hand. The past 12 hours had stripped away all the careful distance they'd been maintaining. In the stark fluorescent light of a hospital room, watching his daughter sleep between worried glances, they'd stopped pretending, stopped hiding behind professional boundaries and logical reasons why this couldn't work. But now, in the ordinary morning light, reality pressed back in. She'd resigned from her company. He was unemployed. They were both carrying enough baggage to sink a ship, and somewhere between admitting they liked each other and figuring out what that meant was a gulf of practical questions neither of them had answers for. Thank you, he said, for coming, for staying. You didn't have to, Av. Yes, I did. She pushed off the car, moving closer. Ryan, when Jennifer told me what happened, I didn't consider whether showing up was appropriate or whether you wanted me there. I just knew I had to be. I'm glad you were. But now I'm standing in a hospital parking lot having an existential crisis about what happens next. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm very good at grand gestures, quitting my job, declaring feelings in crisis moments. Not so good at the actual relationship part. Join the club. I haven't dated anyone since Sarah. Wouldn't know where to start if I tried. Chloe's voice drifted through the open car window. You could start with dinner. Normal people do that. Ryan closed his eyes. She has supernatural hearing. And opinions, Olivia added. So many opinions. Olivia smiled, then sobered. But she's not wrong. We should talk. Actually talk, without hospital drama or work stress. Figure out what this is, what we want it to be. Dinner? Dinner. Tomorrow night? I know a place that's quiet, good food, not too formal. Ryan thought about his dwindling severance, about budgets and pride, and the weird economics of dating someone who, until recently, had been a billionaire CEO. I can't really afford my invitation. My choice of restaurant. You can buy next time if there is a next time. She held up a hand before he could protest. I quit my job, Ryan, not my bank account. Let me do this. Okay, tomorrow, but only if Mrs. Chen can watch Chloe. I'll watch myself, Chloe called out. I'm very responsible and also almost died, so you owe me. You had anemia. Severe anemia. I heard the doctor. That's basically almost dying. Olivia laughed, and the sound made something warm unfold in Ryan's chest. She's something else. That's one way to put it. He checked his phone for the time, realizing he'd been awake for over 24 hours and was running on nothing but adrenaline and hospital coffee. I should get her home, get some sleep. Text me your address. I'll pick you up at 7. I can drive. Ryan. Olivia's expression turned gentle. Let me do this. Let me take care of something for once instead of always being taken care of. He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some semblance of independence and control. But the truth was, he was tired. Tired of carrying everything alone, of pretending he didn't need help, of being strong when what he really wanted was to lean on someone who understood. 7 o'clock. Don't judge the apartment. I've seen where you live. I sent you flowers there after Melbourne got approved. Ryan blinked. That was you? The card just said congratulations. I'm not good at signing my feelings. She moved closer, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes that matched his own. But I'm trying to learn. She kissed his cheek, brief, warm, terrifying in its implications, then got in her car and drove away before he could find words. Ryan stood in the parking lot for a long moment, processing. Then he got in his car where Chloe was waiting with an expression of profound satisfaction. You like her. We've established this. No, you like her, the way cartoon characters get heart eyes. I don't have heart eyes. You totally do. It's cute. Weird, but cute. Ryan started the car, not trusting himself to respond. His daughter had just spent the night in a hospital, and here she was playing matchmaker like it was her job. He didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. Dad? Yeah, Princess? I like her too, just so you know. Chloe's voice got quieter. And I think Mom would have liked her. The observation hit him sideways. Ryan had spent 5 years carefully avoiding any situation where Sarah's memory and new possibilities collided. Had convinced himself that moving forward meant dishonoring the past, that happiness again somehow diminished what he'd had. But Chloe was right. Sarah would have liked Olivia, would have appreciated her intelligence, her refusal to diminish herself, her willingness to admit vulnerability. Sarah had always valued authenticity over performance, truth over comfort. Yeah, he said quietly. I think she would have. They drove home in comfortable silence, Chloe dozing in the back seat, and Ryan let himself imagine what tomorrow night might look like. A real dinner. A real conversation about real feelings. No crisis, no work pressure, no excuses to avoid the truth. It was terrifying. Mrs. Chen met them at the apartment door with the kind of concern that came from actually caring. She'd made soup, her cure for everything, and refused to leave until Ryan promised he'd sleep, and Chloe promised she'd eat vegetables. You look terrible, she told Ryan bluntly. Hospital lighting does that. No, worry does that. Fear. She touched his arm. But she's okay, yes? Your girl is okay. She's okay. Anemia. Treatable. Mrs. Chen nodded, satisfied. Good. Now sleep. I'll check on you later. Ryan did sleep, crashing hard around noon and not waking until Chloe shook him at 6 p.m. with the announcement that Mrs. Chen had brought more soup, and also did he know he had a date tomorrow because she'd overheard him talking, and everyone in the building was very excited about it. Everyone in the building knows? Mrs. Chen has a big mouth. Also, Mrs. Rodriguez asked if she could help pick your outfit because apparently you have no fashion sense. I have fashion sense. Dad, you wore the same tie for 3 years. It was a good tie. It was a Target tie with a stain you thought nobody noticed. Ryan groaned, accepting that his personal life was now community property. The building had watched him struggle through single parenthood for 5 years, had seen him at his worst, had collectively helped raise Chloe when he couldn't do it alone. Of course, they were invested in whether he found happiness again. The next evening arrived with the kind of nervous energy Ryan hadn't felt since high school. He tried on 4 different shirts, rejected all of them, and finally let Mrs. Rodriguez make the final decision on dark jeans and a button-down that apparently brought out his eyes, whatever that meant. Chloe supervised from his bed, offering commentary. Not that one. You look like you're going to a funeral. This one makes you look like you're trying too hard. That one's good. Olivia will like that one. How do you know what Olivia likes? I have instincts. Also, I asked her. When did you ask her? At the hospital, while you were getting coffee. We had a whole conversation about what kind of person you are and what she should expect. Chloe examined her nails like a CEO evaluating quarterly reports. I told her you're stubborn but loyal, that you cry at animated movies but pretend you don't, and that you're scared of failing people you love. Ryan sat down hard on the bed. You told her all that? She needed to know what she was getting into. Also, she told me stuff about her. Like what? Like she's scared she doesn't know how to be in a relationship because work was easier than feelings. Like she thinks she doesn't deserve good things because of her brother dying. Like she looks at you and feels hopeful for the first time in years. Chloe met his eyes. She's kind of a mess, Dad, but like in a way that matches your mess. I'm not a mess. You're a disaster held together by coffee and stubbornness, but it's okay. Olivia likes disasters. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Ryan checked his reflection one last time. He looked nervous and trying too hard to hide it, then opened the door. Olivia stood there in jeans and a sweater, casual in a way he'd never seen her. No designer clothes, no corporate armor, just a woman who looked as nervous as he felt. Hi. Ryan was suddenly aware of how small his apartment was, how worn the furniture looked, how different this world was from the Sterling estate. You look nice. You look terrified. Little bit. Good. Me too. She glanced past him to where Chloe hovered in the living room, pretending not to eavesdrop. Hey, Chloe. Feeling better? Much better. Dad's very nervous. He changed shirts 4 times. Chloe. I changed outfits 3 times, so we're even. Olivia stepped inside and Ryan caught that familiar scent of her perfume. Mrs. Chen's watching you tonight? Yes, and she has strict instructions to call if anything feels wrong. Ryan grabbed his jacket. Which she will, because she takes instructions very seriously. They said goodbye to Chloe, who made them promise to have fun in a tone that suggested she was the parent sending kids off to prom. Then they were in Olivia's car, something expensive but not flashy, driving through Chicago as evening settled over the city. So, Olivia said, after a few blocks of silence. So, this is weird. Extremely weird. We've spent hours together, days, but somehow this feels completely different. Ryan watched the city pass by outside his window. Because before we had excuses. Work, crisis, Chloe in the hospital. Now it's just us deciding to be here. And that's terrifying because it means we actually want this. Do we? Want this? Olivia was quiet long enough that Ryan started to wonder if he'd pushed too hard, asked the wrong question. Then she pulled into a parking spot outside a small Italian restaurant that looked family-owned and completely unpretentious. I don't know, she said, turning off the engine. I know I want to find out. Know that thinking about you makes me smile when nothing else does. Know that when Chloe collapsed, my first thought wasn't about work or reputation or any of the things that usually consume me. It was just getting to you. Olivia, but I also know I'm a disaster at relationships. The last person I dated seriously was in college, and I chose a board meeting over his graduation. We broke up 2 weeks later. Every relationship since has been casual by design because I convinced myself I was better alone. Were you? Better alone? I was safer alone. There's a difference. She met his eyes. What about you? What do you want? Ryan thought about the past 5 years, about building a life from grief, about protecting his heart behind walls of routine and responsibility, about convincing himself that being Chloe's father was enough to fill all the empty spaces. I want to stop being afraid, he said quietly, afraid of caring about someone again. Afraid of what it means if I let you in and something goes wrong. Afraid that being happy somehow betrays Sarah's memory. Does Chloe think that? That being happy betrays her mother? No, she thinks I'm being stupid about feelings. Olivia laughed. She's not wrong. They sat in the car for another moment, two people on the edge of something that could change everything or destroy them both. Then Olivia reached across the console and took his hand. Let's make a deal. Tonight we're just two people having dinner. No pressure, no expectations, no deciding what this means long term. Just honest conversation and decent pasta. I can do that. Good. Because I'm starving and I reserved a table 20 minutes ago that we're about to miss. The restaurant was exactly what Olivia had promised. Quiet, warm, the kind of place where the owner knew regular customers by name. They were seated in a corner booth that offered privacy without feeling isolated, and the waiter brought bread and wine without asking. "You've been here before," Ryan observed. "It was my brother's favorite place. Daniel loved their carbonara, claimed it was better than anything in Rome even though he'd never been to Rome." She smiled at the memory. "I haven't been back since he died, but I wanted to tonight." "Why?" "Because he would have liked you, would have appreciated someone who calls me on my bullshit and doesn't let me hide behind work." She broke off a piece of bread. "And because some part of me thinks he'd be happy I'm finally trying." Ryan understood that. Bringing someone to a place that held memories of loss meant trusting them with the tender parts, the places that still hurt. It was vulnerability dressed as dinner plans. "Tell me about him, if you want to." Olivia did. Talked about Daniel's terrible jokes, his obsession with soccer, despite being clumsy, the way he'd leave notes around the house just to make people laugh. Talked about guilt and grief and the weight of wondering what life would have looked like if she'd made different choices that day. Ryan listened, recognizing the shape of her pain because it matched his own. Different details, same core, people trying to survive loss that shouldn't have happened, trying to forgive themselves for things beyond their control. "Sarah died in childbirth," he said when she finished. "Complications nobody saw coming. One minute she was laughing about baby names, the next she was coding and the doctors were yelling and I was standing there completely useless. Ryan, they gave me a choice. Her or the baby. Had about 10 seconds to decide who lived." His voice cracked. "I chose Chloe. And Sarah would have wanted that. Would have been furious if I'd chosen differently. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm the reason she's not here." Olivia's hand found his across the table. "That's not how it works." "Isn't it?" "I made a choice. She died." "You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. That's not the same as causing her death." She squeezed his fingers. "And Chloe exists because of that choice. Beautiful, brilliant, stubborn Chloe, who quotes statistics and explains entropy to cats. You gave the world that. You gave yourself that. Some days I look at her and just see everything Sarah's missing. And some days I look at her and see everything I got right." Ryan wiped his eyes, embarrassed by the tears. "Sorry, not exactly first date material." "This isn't a first date. This is two disasters having dinner and accidentally being honest." Olivia smiled. "I'll take honesty over performance any day." They ordered food, carbonara for her, linguine for him, and the conversation shifted to easier territory. Chloe's science obsessions, Olivia's terrible cooking skills, Ryan's failed attempt to learn guitar because he thought it would make him a cooler dad. Did it work? "Chloe told me I sounded like cats fighting, in detail, with scientific analysis of frequency and pitch. She's ruthless. She's honest. Sometimes I can't tell if that's from Sarah's genes or my parenting. Probably both." Olivia twirled pasta on her fork. "What was Sarah like? Really like? Beyond the grief?" Ryan thought about his wife, about the woman who'd existed before becoming a memory. Chaotic brilliant. She could explain quantum mechanics, but couldn't remember to pay the electric bill. Laughed too loud in movies, cried at commercials, argued about everything because she genuinely loved debate. She sounds exhausting. She was. In the best way. He smiled at the memory. "We fought constantly, not real fights, just debates about everything from politics to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She'd argue the opposite of whatever position I took, just to see if I could defend it." "Did you love her?" "Completely. Probably more than was healthy." Ryan met Olivia's eyes. "But I've learned something these past 5 years. Loving someone who's gone doesn't mean you can't love someone who's here. The heart's not that limited." Is that what this is? Love? The question hung between them, too big and too soon. Ryan thought about honesty, about Olivia bringing him to her brother's favorite restaurant, about the risk they were both taking just by being here. "I don't know yet, but I think it could be. If we're brave enough. And if we're not? If we try this and it falls apart? Then at least we'll know we tried. That's what you said in the hospital, remember? Olivia smiled, using my own words against me. Clever. I learned from the best. They finished dinner slowly, stretching the meal into 2 hours of conversation that ranged from trivial to profound. Ryan learned that Olivia sang off key in the shower, that she'd once tried to learn Mandarin and given up after 3 weeks, that she was terrified of birds for reasons she couldn't explain. She learned that Ryan had a scar from falling out of a tree at age 9, that he couldn't function without coffee, that he'd once driven 4 hours to find Chloe a specific stuffed rabbit she'd seen in a store window and then couldn't stop thinking about. They learned each other in the way people do when they stop performing and start revealing. It was messy, imperfect, and absolutely real. Walking back to the car, Olivia's hand found his, fingers interlacing naturally. They didn't talk, just walked through the quiet Chicago evening, and Ryan felt something settle in his chest. This could work. This terrifying, complicated, impossible thing might actually work. "Come home with me," Olivia said as they reached her car. Ryan stopped. "What? Not like that. I mean, unless you want it to be like that, but that's not what I'm suggesting." She looked flustered, which was adorable. "I just mean my place isn't far and I have good coffee, and I'm not ready for tonight to end. I should get back to Chloe. Text Mrs. Chen, ask if it's okay." Olivia's expression turned vulnerable. "I know it's late, I know it's a lot, but I want more time. Is that selfish?" Ryan checked his phone. It was nearly 10, and Mrs. Chen had texted an hour ago that Chloe was asleep and everything was fine. He could stay out, could extend this evening into something more. He could also go home, maintain boundaries, take this slow and careful and safe. "Okay," he said, "but only if the coffee's actually good. It's imported from someplace with an Italian name I can't pronounce. Costs more than your monthly groceries." Sounds pretentious. It absolutely is. Olivia's penthouse was everything Ryan expected. Expensive, modern, with views of Chicago that made the city look like a toy. But it was also surprisingly empty of personality. No photos, no knickknacks, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived there. "I know," Olivia said, watching him look around. "It's sterile. My interior designer called it minimalist elegance. I call it lonely. Why not change it? Because I was never here long enough to care. Work was my home. This was just where I slept between meetings." She made coffee in a machine that looked complicated and expensive, and they sat on her couch, white, uncomfortable, definitely chosen by someone else, drinking from mugs that matched nothing. "This is weird," Ryan said. "Which part?" "All of it. Being here, drinking overpriced coffee, pretending I belong in a penthouse." "You don't belong in a penthouse. Neither do I, honestly. I belong in libraries and coffee shops, and places where people actually live." Olivia set down her mug. "I bought this place because my father said successful people lived in penthouses, decorated it the way he said it should look, maintained it like a museum because that's what was expected. And now? Now I don't care what's expected. I quit the company, remember? I'm officially unemployed and lost. That makes 2 of us." They sat in silence for a moment. 2 people who'd built identities around work discovering what existed underneath. It should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like relief. "Ryan, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "At the hospital, when I showed up, were you angry that I was there?" The question surprised him. "No. Why would I be angry?" "Because I'd hurt you. Chosen the company over you. Made it clear that work would always come first." She looked down at her hands. "I thought maybe seeing me would just make things worse. Honestly, when you walked through those doors, all I felt was relief. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Because someone else cared enough to show up." He set down his own mug, shifting to face her. "I was angry before. At the office, when you transferred me. But sitting in that hospital, watching Chloe sleep, all I could think was that life's too short to hold grudges about things that don't matter. I matter. You matter." Olivia kissed him. Not gently, not tentatively, but with the kind of desperation that came from weeks of wanting and denying and pretending. Ryan kissed back, pulling her closer, and for a moment everything else disappeared. The unemployment, the uncertainty, the fear. This was just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate disasters, deciding that maybe being broken together was better than being whole alone. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Olivia rested her forehead against his. I'm still terrified. Me too. But less terrified than I was this morning. Progress. She laughed, and the sound was bright and real and absolutely perfect. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other on an uncomfortable couch in a penthouse neither of them belonged in, and somehow it felt exactly right. Ryan's phone buzzed around midnight. Mrs. Chen checking in, making sure he was okay. He texted back that he was fine, would be home soon, and thank you for everything. I should go, he said reluctantly. I know. Olivia didn't let go. But maybe you could not go for 5 more minutes? 5 minutes. 5 turned into 20, and when Ryan finally left, driving through the quiet Chicago streets toward his small apartment and his sleeping daughter, he felt different. Lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying weight he hadn't realized was there, and someone had finally helped him set it down. His phone buzzed at a red light. Olivia, thank you for tonight. Ryan, thank you for the overpriced coffee. It's good coffee. It's pretentious coffee, but I liked it anyway. Like the woman who made it? Ryan smiled at the screen. Especially the woman who made it. He got home to find Mrs. Chen asleep in his armchair, a book open on her lap. He covered her with a blanket, checked on Chloe, still sleeping, her rabbit clutched tight, and stood in his daughter's doorway for a long moment. This was his life. Small apartment, secondhand furniture, a 7-year-old who thought she knew everything. And now, maybe, someone who saw all of that and wanted to be part of it anyway. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was real and honest, and more than he'd let himself hope for in 5 years. Ryan pulled out his phone one more time, typing a message he probably shouldn't send at 1 a.m. I think I'm falling for you. Just thought you should know. The response came immediately. I think I already fell, scared the hell out of me. Still does. What do we do about it? Wake up tomorrow and try again. And the day after that. Until being scared feels less important than being together. I can do that. Good. Because I'm not letting you go now that I finally found you. Ryan fell asleep that night with his phone on his nightstand and something like hope in his chest. Tomorrow would bring all the usual problems, bills, job hunting, figuring out how to build a relationship while unemployed and raising a kid. But tomorrow would also bring Olivia. And for the first time since Sarah died, that felt like enough. Morning came too early and too bright, with Chloe standing beside Ryan's bed holding a spatula like a weapon. You're smiling in your sleep. It's creepy. Ryan cracked one eye open. What time is it? 7:30. I made breakfast. Well, I tried. Mrs. Chen helped because apparently 7-year-olds aren't supposed to use stoves unsupervised, even though I'm very responsible. Very responsible people don't need to announce they're responsible. That's circular logic, Dad. He dragged himself out of bed, following the smell of something burning. In the kitchen, Mrs. Chen was salvaging what looked like an attempt at pancakes while Chloe supervised with the intensity of a health inspector. They're supposed to be round, Chloe insisted. They are round, just abstract round. Mrs. Chen looked up at Ryan. She wanted to make you celebration breakfast, because apparently you have a girlfriend now, and this is important. I don't have a... We're not... It's complicated. Adults always say complicated when they mean scary. Chloe pointed the spatula at him. Did you have a good time last night? Yes. Did you kiss her? Chloe, it's a reasonable question. Kissing indicates romantic interest and commitment to exploring emotional connection. Mrs. Chen laughed so hard she nearly dropped the pan. Where does she learn these things? Internet, books, listening to adults who think she's not paying attention. Ryan accepted a misshapen pancake. And yes, princess, I kissed her. Good. She's too pretty and smart to not kiss. That would be a waste of resources. Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Good morning. Still processing last night. In a good way. He typed back, same. Chloe made me celebration pancakes. She knows? She knows everything. It's terrifying. Can I see you today? Ryan looked at his schedule, which was empty because unemployment, and realized he had no excuse to say no. No reason except fear, and he'd promised himself last night he was done letting fear make decisions. Come over for lunch? Fair warning. Apartment is small and Chloe will interrogate you. I've survived board meetings. I can handle a 7-year-old. You say that now. 2 hours later, Olivia showed up at his door wearing jeans and a Northwestern sweatshirt, looking nothing like a billionaire CEO and everything like someone Ryan could imagine building a life with. She carried a bag from a bakery that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. I brought dessert. Possibly too much dessert. She looked nervous. I didn't know what Chloe liked, so I got 6 different kinds. She likes all desserts. You've created a monster. Chloe appeared from her room, took one look at the bakery bag, and declared Olivia her favorite person. They sat around Ryan's small kitchen table, the one that wobbled because one leg was shorter than the others, and ate sandwiches Ryan had made with grocery store bread and deli meat. Olivia ate like she'd never tasted anything better. This is good. It's a sandwich. It's a sandwich made by someone who cares about getting it right. There's a difference. She caught his eye across the table. I usually eat lunch at my desk. Something expensive and tasteless that I don't remember 5 minutes later. That's sad, Chloe observed. Food should be memorable. Otherwise, what's the point? Efficiency? Efficiency is a capitalist construct designed to maximize productivity at the expense of human experience. Ryan choked on his water. Where did you hear that? Documentary about factory farming. Made me think about systems of exploitation. Chloe bit into her sandwich. Also, I'm vegetarian now. Since when? Since 20 minutes ago when I decided animal suffering was inconsistent with my values. Olivia was trying not to laugh. You're raising a revolutionary. I'm raising someone who's going to give me gray hair by 35. They spent the afternoon in the kind of ordinary domesticity Ryan had forgotten existed. Chloe showed Olivia her rock collection, each stone labeled with scientific precision about origin and composition. Olivia asked questions that weren't condescending, listened like a child's interests actually mattered, and somehow ended up in a debate about plate tectonics that went over Ryan's head. You're good with her, he said later when Chloe had disappeared into her room to reorganize something. She's easy to be good with. She's honest, curious, doesn't play games. Olivia leaned against the kitchen counter. Most adults could learn from that. Most adults are terrified of that level of honesty. Are you? Terrified? Ryan thought about the question. About 5 years of careful walls, of protecting himself and Chloe from anything that could hurt them. About last night's kiss, this morning's texts, the way Olivia looked at him like he was worth the risk. Less than I was yesterday. Still scared, but less. What scares you most? That I'll mess this up. That I'll hurt you or you'll hurt me and Chloe gets caught in the crossfire. That I'm being selfish wanting this when I should just focus on being her dad. Olivia moved closer, and Ryan caught that familiar scent of her perfume mixed with something simpler. Just her. Can I tell you what scares me? Please. That I'll revert to who I was. That the first time work calls, and it will call because I can't stay unemployed forever. I'll choose it over this. Over you. That I'm fundamentally too broken to be in a relationship and I'm just wasting your time. You're not broken. Neither are you, but we're both damaged in ways that match up badly. She took his hand. The question is whether we're brave enough to try anyway. Before Ryan could answer, Chloe's voice carried from her room. You should kiss her again. I can hear you talking in serious voices, and kissing makes those conversations less depressing. Olivia laughed, and Ryan pulled her close, kissing her like his daughter wasn't in the next room, offering commentary on his romantic life. When they broke apart, Olivia was smiling. She's not wrong. She's never wrong. It's exhausting. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt simultaneously natural and impossible. Olivia came over most days, usually bearing expensive bakery items that made Chloe declare her the best person alive. She helped with homework, asked intelligent questions about Chloe's increasingly complex science projects, and didn't flinch when Ryan's apartment revealed new levels of chaos. Ryan learned that Olivia sang while doing dishes, that she was terrible at video games but tried anyway because Chloe found her failures hilarious, that she cried at animal rescue videos and tried to hide it. They learned each other in increments, in small moments between job applications and doctor's appointments, and the ordinary machinery of life. It wasn't smooth. They fought about stupid things like whether to alphabetize books or organize by subject, whether pineapple belonged on pizza, whose turn it was to choose the movie. But they also learned to fight fair, to admit when they were wrong, to apologize without deflecting, to recognize when fear was talking instead of sense. "I got a job offer," Olivia said one evening, 3 weeks into whatever this was. They were sitting on Ryan's couch, the second-hand one with the stain he'd never successfully removed, while Chloe read in her room. Ryan felt his stomach drop. "Where?" "Tech startup. VP of operations. Good salary, stock options, the kind of position where I'd be building something instead of maintaining my father's legacy." "That's amazing. It's in Seattle." The words hung between them, heavy with implications. Seattle meant leaving, meant choosing a career over this fragile thing they were building, meant proving right every fear Ryan had about Olivia reverting to who she'd been. "When do they need an answer?" 2 weeks. Olivia wasn't looking at him. "It's everything I should want, Ryan. Clean break from Chicago, from my father's shadow, from the board members who never believed in me. Chance to prove I can succeed on my own terms. You should take it." Now she looked at him. "What?" "You should take it. It's a good opportunity. You'd be stupid to turn it down for—" He gestured vaguely between them. "For whatever this is." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend this doesn't matter. Pretend you're fine with me leaving when I can see in your face that you're not." Her voice cracked. "I'm trying to be honest here. Trying to tell you I got offered my dream job and I don't know if I want it because it means losing you." Ryan stood, needing to move. "You've known me for 3 weeks, Olivia. That's not enough time to turn down a dream job." "It's been longer than 3 weeks, and you know it. 3 weeks of actually being together. Everything before was just what? Just work? Just pretending we didn't have feelings?" She stood too, angry now. "I quit my company for you, walked away from everything I'd built because I realized it meant nothing if I couldn't have this. And now you're telling me to leave? I'm telling you not to make me the reason you stay. Because what happens in 6 months when you resent me for it? When you look around and realize you gave up your dreams for some unemployed single dad in a crappy apartment? Is that what you think? That I'd resent you? I think people regret sacrifices. I think resentment builds from choices we make for other people instead of ourselves." He ran his hands through his hair. "Sarah gave up a fellowship to stay in Chicago with me. She said it was fine, said being together mattered more. But I always wondered if she regretted it. If dying in childbirth felt like the ultimate price for a choice she shouldn't have made." Olivia's expression softened. "Ryan, that's not... It's exactly how it works. You make choices for other people, and then when things go wrong, you can't help wondering what life would have looked like if you'd chosen differently. So you want me to go to Seattle. I want you to make the choice that's right for you, not for us. For you. And if the choice that's right for me is staying here," Ryan looked at her. This brilliant, complicated woman who'd somehow decided he was worth the risk and felt everything he'd been protecting himself from crash over him at once. Love, terror, hope, fear, all of it tangled together in a way that made breathing hard. "Then you stay. But you stay because you want to, not because you're afraid of losing me." They stood in silence, two people who'd gotten good at honesty, but bad at knowing what to do with it. Finally, Olivia grabbed her coat. "I need to think. I need space to figure out what I actually want without you being noble and self-sacrificing." "Olivia, I'll call you tomorrow." She left, and Ryan stood in his empty apartment feeling like he'd just made either the best decision or the worst mistake of his life. Possibly both. Chloe emerged from her room, book in hand. "You're an idiot." "I'm trying to do the right thing." The right thing is letting people make their own choices instead of deciding for them what they should want. She climbed onto the couch. "Mom chose you, right? Chose staying here over the fellowship?" "Yes." "And you think she regretted it?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Did she ever say she regretted it?" Ryan thought back to those last coherent moments before everything went wrong. Sarah had been scared but excited, talking about baby names and painting the nursery and how their life was about to change in the best way. She hadn't mentioned regret, hadn't looked back at roads not taken. "No," he said quietly. "She never said that." "Then maybe you're projecting your guilt onto her choices. Maybe she made the decision that was right for her, and you not believing that is the actual problem." Ryan stared at his 7-year-old daughter. "How are you this smart?" "Genetics and good parenting. Also, I read a lot of psychology books because understanding human behavior is interesting. She went back to her room, then paused at the door. Olivia loves you. Even I can see that. Don't push her away because you're scared of being loved. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the conversation, wondering if Chloe was right. If he was sabotaging something real because the alternative, actually being happy, actually letting someone in, felt more terrifying than being alone. His phone buzzed at 2 a.m. Olivia. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what you said. Ryan. Same. I'm sorry for pushing. You weren't pushing. You were protecting. I understand that. Do you know what you want? I'm figuring it out. Give me time. All the time you need. 3 days passed with minimal contact. Olivia texted occasionally, updates about job interviews, pictures of things that made her think of him, nothing that addressed the actual question hanging between them. Ryan threw himself into job hunting with renewed desperation. The severance was running out, and pride only paid bills in fantasy worlds. He had interviews with 3 different companies, none of which felt right, but all of which offered stability. On the 4th day, Marcus called. Sterling Industries is looking for a chief operations officer. Ryan's laugh was bitter. They fired me, Marcus. Why would they hire me back? Because Harrison Sterling personally requested your application. Said the Melbourne expansion is exceeding projections, and he wants the person who designed it running operations. That's insane. That's desperation. They're bleeding talent since Olivia left. 3 senior VPs resigned, the board is fracturing, and your Melbourne strategy is the only thing keeping investors confident. Marcus paused. It's a hell of a job, Ryan. Triple your old salary, real authority, chance to actually fix things. And I'd be working for Olivia's father. You'd be working for yourself. Building something that matters. Isn't that what you wanted? Ryan thought about it. About walking back into Sterling Industries with real power, real ability to shape the company's direction. About proving he was more than just a project coordinator who'd gotten lucky. About working in the building where he'd first seen Olivia standing uncertain in front of a mirror, asking if she looked good. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. They need an answer by Friday. Ryan told Chloe about the offer over dinner. Spaghetti from a box because his cooking skills hadn't improved with unemployment. Would you take it? I don't know. It's complicated. Because of Olivia? Because of a lot of things. It's her father's company, the place she walked away from. Taking a job there feels like... Like what? Like betraying her? Chloe twirled pasta on her fork. Or like proving you're still scared of building your own life? Ryan set down his fork. When did you get so good at therapy speak? I told you, I read psychology books. Also, Mrs. Chen gives good advice. She met his eyes. Do you want the job? Part of me does. The part that likes fixing broken things, that wants to prove I can succeed. Then take it. Stop making decisions based on what you think other people want you to do. It's not that simple. It actually is. You're just complicating it because being scared feels safer than being happy. She was right, again. Ryan was starting to suspect his daughter was smarter than him, which was both impressive and mildly concerning. Friday came with still no word from Olivia beyond basic texts. Ryan sat in his apartment, the Sterling Industries offer letter on the table, and tried to figure out what he actually wanted. The answer came when Chloe climbed into his lap, something she rarely did anymore, too grown up for obvious affection, and said quietly, I miss her. Me too, princess. Is she coming back? I don't know. Did you push her away because you're scared? Ryan thought about denying it, about explaining that he'd been trying to do the right thing. Instead, he said, yes, I pushed her away because loving someone again scares me more than being alone. That's dumb. I know. So fix it. How? Chloe looked at him like he was being deliberately dense. Tell her the truth. Tell her you love her and you're scared and you want her to stay. Give her the actual choice instead of making it for her. Ryan kissed his daughter's forehead. When did you get smarter than me? I was always smarter. You're just finally noticing. He grabbed his phone, typing before he could second guess. I need to see you. Can we talk? The response came immediately. I'm outside. Ryan went to the window. Olivia's car was parked on the street, and she was sitting inside staring at his building like she'd been working up courage to come in. He was down the stairs and out the door before he could think about it. Olivia got out of her car and they stood on the sidewalk in the evening light, two people who'd spent a week avoiding the truth. "I turned down Seattle," she said. "What?" "Turned it down this morning. Told them thank you, but I'm staying in Chicago." Ryan's heart was pounding. "Why?" "Because I realized something. I've spent my entire life chasing other people's definitions of success. My father's, the board's, society's. Always trying to prove I was enough, smart enough, strong enough, and it never worked. I was never enough because I was measuring myself against impossible standards." "Olivia, but then I met you, and Chloe, and for the first time I felt like maybe I was enough exactly as I am. Messy, scared, still figuring things out. You didn't need me to be a CEO or a billionaire or anything except honest. You are enough. You've always been enough. I know that now. Because you taught me." She moved closer. "So I turned down Seattle because the life I want is here, with you, if you'll have me. With Chloe and your terrible apartment and Mrs. Chen's unsolicited advice. That's the dream, Ryan, not some job in a city I don't know." Ryan felt tears threatening. "I got a job offer too, chief operations officer at Sterling Industries." Olivia's eyes widened. "My father? Apparently the board is desperate. They want me to fix what's broken. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to prove I can do it. Part of me thinks working for your father is a terrible idea." "It's a terrible idea," Olivia agreed. "Harrison Sterling will undermine you, second-guess you, make your life miserable because that's what he does." "So I should turn it down?" "I think you should do whatever makes you happy. If fixing Sterling Industries makes you happy, take the job. If it doesn't, find something that does." She took his hands. "But don't make the decision based on me. Don't turn it down because you think I'll be uncomfortable with you working there. Make the choice that's right for you." Ryan realized what she was doing, giving him the same freedom he'd tried to give her. The same chance to choose without pressure or expectation. It was terrifying and perfect in equal measure. "What if I take it and we fight all the time because you have opinions about how I run your father's company?" "Then we fight. We figure it out. We learn to separate work from us." She smiled. "We're both disasters, remember? Might as well be disasters together." Ryan pulled her close, kissing her with everything he'd been too scared to say. When they broke apart, he was smiling. "I love you. I've been trying not to say it because it's too soon and too scary, but I love you. And I want you to stay, want you to be part of this messy, complicated life." "I love you too. Have for weeks, probably longer if I'm honest." "And Chloe?" "I love Chloe. How could I not? She's brilliant and honest and everything I want to be when I grow up." They stood on the sidewalk as evening settled into night, holding each other like they'd found something worth keeping. Above them, Chloe watched from the window, and Ryan caught her giving a thumbs up before disappearing back inside. "She approves," he said. "Of course she does. She orchestrated this entire thing." "Probably." They went inside together, and Olivia stayed for dinner. More boxed spaghetti, because Ryan still couldn't cook. But it was perfect anyway, because perfection wasn't about the food or the setting. It was about being exactly where they wanted to be, with exactly who they wanted to be with. Ryan took the Sterling Industries job, spent his first week navigating Harrison Sterling's passive aggression and the board's skepticism. It was exhausting, challenging, and absolutely engaging in ways he'd forgotten work could be. Olivia started consulting, helping small companies with strategic planning, using her expertise without the suffocating pressure of running an empire. She was happier than Ryan had ever seen her, lighter somehow. They fought sometimes about work decisions, about whether Chloe should be allowed to attempt building a rocket in the backyard, about whose turn it was to handle the dishes. But they also learned to fight fair, to apologize, to recognize when fear was talking instead of love. 6 months later, another gala appeared on the calendar. The Belmont Foundation's annual event, and as Chief Operations Officer, Ryan was expected to attend. He stood in front of his mirror, the same cheap one that had hung in his apartment for 5 years, adjusting a bow tie that Olivia had insisted on buying him. She appeared in the doorway of his bedroom wearing midnight blue, a different dress than that first night, but the same color. Her hair was up, diamonds at her ears, and she looked absolutely stunning. "Do I look good in this dress?" she asked, echoing words from months ago. Ryan turned, and his answer was immediate and true. I can't take my eyes off you. Even after 6 months? Especially after 6 months. She crossed to him, fixing his bow tie with practiced ease. Nervous about tonight? Terrified. Your father's going to be there, along with everyone who bet against me succeeding. Then we'll prove them wrong, together. She kissed him softly. Besides, you've got me and Chloe in your corner. We're a formidable team. The most formidable. They picked up Chloe from Mrs. Chen's. She was staying overnight because 8-year-olds didn't attend galas, even when they thought the age restriction was discriminatory. Chloe examined them both critically. You both look fancy. Try not to be boring at the party. We'll do our best, Olivia promised. Also, Dad, don't forget to eat. You always forget to eat at events, and then you get cranky. I don't get cranky. You absolutely do. Olivia, make sure he eats. I'll handle it. Good. Also, I need $20 for the science fair next week. What happened to the $20 I gave you last month? Invested in supplies for my ecosystem project. It's called capital allocation, Dad. You should know this. Ryan pulled out his wallet, handing over the money. You're going to bankrupt me. Knowledge is expensive. Deal with it. They left Chloe with promises to tell her everything interesting that happened, though they definitely edited out the boring parts. The drive to the venue was quiet, comfortable, Ryan's hand resting on Olivia's knee while she drove. You've come a long way from the guy who was terrified to be at my family dinner, she observed. I'm still terrified, just better at hiding it. No, you're better at being brave despite the terror. There's a difference. The gala was exactly what Ryan expected. Expensive people in expensive clothes, champagne, small talk that meant nothing. But this time he had Olivia beside him, not as his boss, but as his partner. They worked the room together, and he watched her handle social interactions with the same intelligence she brought to everything. Harrison Sterling appeared halfway through the evening, looking at Ryan with an expression that might have been respect or might have been indigestion. Hayes, the Melbourne expansion numbers are impressive. Thank you, sir. Don't get cocky. You've had 6 months. Let's see how you handle year 2. Harrison's gaze shifted to Olivia. And you? Still wasting your potential on consulting? Still building something that makes me happy, Olivia replied evenly. You should try it sometime. Ryan expected Harrison to get angry, to lash out the way he usually did when challenged. Instead, the older man smiled, barely, but real. You're more like me than you want to admit. Then I'll work harder to be better than you. Harrison nodded once, the closest he'd come to approval, and walked away. Olivia let out a breath she'd been holding. That went better than expected. He didn't threaten to fire me or disown you. I'd call it a win. They danced later, swaying to music played by a live orchestra that probably cost more than Ryan's annual salary. Olivia rested her head on his shoulder, and Ryan thought about that first night, about her asking if she looked good, about the moment everything had changed. What are you thinking about? She asked. How different this is from the last gala. How different I am. Better different or worse different? Better. Definitely better. He pulled back to look at her. I spent 5 years convincing myself that surviving was enough, that being Chloe's father was all I needed to feel complete. And it was enough, in a way. But this, having you, building something with you, it's more than I knew was possible. Olivia's eyes were bright. You gave me that too, showed me that success isn't about titles or money or proving anything to anyone except yourself, that being happy is its own kind of achievement. We're both pretty smart for a couple of disasters. The smartest disasters Chicago has ever seen. They stayed until the event wound down, then drove home through quiet streets. Ryan walked Olivia to her penthouse door. She still lived there, though it was slowly accumulating personality as she let herself care about the space. Come up? She asked. It's late. I should get home to Chloe. She's at Mrs. Chen's until tomorrow morning. You have time. Ryan followed her up, and they sat on her couch, still white, still uncomfortable, but somehow more lived in now. Olivia kicked off her heels with relief. These things are torture devices. You could wear comfortable shoes. That's not how formal events work, Ryan. There are rules. Says who? Says everyone who's ever attended a gala. Then maybe the rules are stupid. She laughed, curling into his side. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing each other well enough that words weren't always necessary. Ryan thought about the future, about job challenges and Chloe growing up and all the ways life could get complicated. But he also thought about this, about quiet moments on uncomfortable couches, about someone who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier, about building something real from broken pieces. "Marry me," he said. Olivia sat up, staring at him. "What?" "Marry me. Not now, not tomorrow, but someday when we're both ready. When we've proven to ourselves this works." He took her hand. "I know it's crazy. We've only been together 6 months, but I know what I want, Olivia, and it's you. It's this. It's building a life together." "That's not a proposal. It's a promise. A promise that when the time is right, I'm going to ask you properly, with a ring and a plan and probably Chloe's input because she'll demand involvement." Olivia was crying, but she was smiling. "You're insane." "Probably. Is that a yes to the eventual proposal?" "It's a yes to considering the eventual proposal when you eventually ask it." She kissed him. "And for the record, I'm going to say yes. Because you're right, this is what I want. You, Chloe, the messy, complicated, beautiful life we're building. Even when I drive you crazy?" "Especially then." Ryan stayed that night and they fell asleep tangled together on her expensive, uncomfortable couch, because moving to the bedroom felt like too much effort. He woke at dawn to find her watching him with an expression he couldn't name. "What?" "Nothing, just memorizing this. How you look when you're peaceful." "I look asleep." "You look happy. There's a difference." He pulled her closer. "I am happy. Terrified, uncertain about the future, worried about screwing this up, but happy." "Good. Me too." 6 months became a year, then 2. Ryan's job at Sterling Industries evolved from survival to actual success. He restructured operations, implemented the Melbourne model globally, and slowly won over even the most skeptical board members. Harrison Sterling never quite became warm, but he stopped actively undermining Ryan's decisions, which counted as progress. Olivia's consulting business grew beyond anything she'd expected. She worked with startups and established companies, teaching them the strategic thinking she'd honed over years. She was happy, fulfilled, and only occasionally missed the adrenaline of running an empire. Chloe grew into a 10-year-old with the same fierce intelligence and complete honesty she'd had at 7. She won science fairs, started an environmental club at school, and informed Ryan regularly that his parenting skills were adequate but could be optimized. They moved, together, into a house that was bigger than Ryan's apartment but smaller than Olivia's penthouse. Something in between, something they chose together. Chloe got her own room for the first time, painted it herself in colors that shouldn't work but somehow did, and filled it with rocks and books and posters about space. The proposal came on an ordinary Tuesday, nothing dramatic or planned. They were in the kitchen, cooking dinner together. Olivia had learned to make 3 dishes competently, which she considered a major achievement. Chloe was at the table doing homework and offering unsolicited opinions on their technique. Ryan looked at Olivia, flour on her nose from some baking disaster, arguing with Chloe about whether garlic counted as a vegetable, and realized this was the moment. Not at some romantic restaurant or planned event, but here, in the messy middle of their lives. He pulled the ring from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Then he'd realized there was no perfect moment, just real ones. "Olivia." She turned, saw the ring, and froze. "I promised I'd ask you properly when the time was right, and I think the time is right now. Not because anything's changed or because we've reached some milestone, but because I wake up every day grateful you're in my life, and I want to keep waking up that way forever." Chloe set down her pencil, watching with the intensity of someone witnessing history. "You make me braver than I knew I could be," Ryan continued. "You love Chloe like she's yours. You call me on my bullshit. You make terrible pancakes, but keep trying. You're messy and complicated and absolutely everything I want. Ryan, so will you marry me? Will you keep building this weird, imperfect, beautiful life with me?" Olivia was crying, nodding before she could speak. "Yes, obviously yes, you idiot." He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him into a kiss that made Chloe announce, "Gross, but also congratulations, I approve." "You approve?" Olivia laughed through tears. "I have to approve. I'm going to be your daughter too, technically. That gives me approval rights. Technically, you'll be my stepdaughter." Semantics. The point is, I'm gaining a mother figure who understands science and doesn't talk down to me. I consider this a win. Ryan looked at his daughter, his brilliant, impossible, perfect daughter, and realized she'd known this was coming. Had probably known before he did. How long have you been planning this reaction? 3 weeks. Since you bought the ring and hid it in your sock drawer like I wouldn't find it, Chloe grinned. I'm very observant. It's my superpower. They ordered pizza that night because dinner had been abandoned in favor of celebration. Sat around their kitchen table, which didn't wobble because Ryan had finally fixed it, and talked about the future, about wedding plans and what it meant and how their family was about to officially become permanent. Small wedding, Olivia said, just people who actually matter. I can do small. And Chloe gets to be involved in the planning. Obviously, Chloe said, someone needs to make sure you don't make terrible decisions about centerpieces. You're 10. What do you know about centerpieces? More than you, apparently. The wedding happened 6 months later, in a small ceremony that was exactly right. Mrs. Chen cried. Marcus gave a speech about how he'd known from the beginning they were perfect for each other, and Chloe served as both flower girl and junior coordinator, making sure everything ran according to her detailed timeline. Harrison Sterling attended, sitting in the back, and if he didn't smile exactly, he at least didn't scowl. Progress. Ryan stood at the altar, watching Olivia walk toward him, and thought about that night 2 years ago. About a question asked in front of a mirror, about honesty given when it would have been easier to lie, about two broken people finding each other in the wreckage of their separate disasters. She reached him, and he took her hands, and the officiant said words about love and commitment and choosing each other every day. Ryan barely heard it. He was too busy looking at Olivia, at the woman who taught him that being happy didn't mean forgetting loss, that moving forward didn't diminish the past. I love you, he whispered while the officiant was still talking. I love you too, she whispered back, even though you're interrupting our own wedding. Can't help it. You look good in that dress. You always say that. It's always true. They kissed before the officiant officially told them to, and Chloe announced loudly that they were jumping ahead in the ceremony, and everyone laughed because that was exactly right for them. Breaking rules, doing things their own way, building something that didn't follow anyone's script but their own. The reception was small, held in the backyard of their house, with lights strung through trees and music and food that people actually wanted to eat instead of whatever was expected at formal events. Ryan danced with his daughter first because she'd requested it and because she deserved to know she was still his priority. You did good, Dad, Chloe said as they swayed to music. You think so? You found someone who makes you happy. You let yourself be happy. That's very brave. I had a good teacher. You did. I'm an excellent teacher, he laughed, spinning her around. What am I going to do when you're grown up and don't need me anymore? I'll always need you, just in different ways. She hugged him tight. And you'll have Olivia. And maybe more kids if you guys decide you want them. Though please consult me first because I have opinions about sibling dynamics. Of course you do. Later, dancing with Olivia while stars appeared overhead and their friends and family surrounded them, Ryan felt something settle in his chest. The weight he'd carried for 7 years, the grief, the guilt, the fear of being happy again, had finally transformed into something lighter. Not gone, never gone. Sarah would always be part of him, part of Chloe, part of the foundation they'd built their lives on. But now there was room for more. Room for Olivia, for joy, for a future that honored the past without being trapped by it. What are you thinking about? Olivia asked. How lucky I am. How improbable this all is. Improbable, but real. The best things usually are. She rested her head on his shoulder, and they swayed to music under the stars. And Ryan thought about the question that had started everything. About Olivia standing in front of a mirror asking if she looked good. About him answering honestly when lying would have been safer. That moment had changed everything. Had cracked open walls he'd built. Had shown him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but courage. That admitting you needed someone, wanted someone, loved someone, was the bravest thing you could do. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For asking the question that night. For being brave enough to be vulnerable when you could have stayed hidden. Thank you for answering honestly, for seeing me when everyone else just saw the CEO. They danced until the music stopped, until guests started leaving, until it was just them and Chloe and the remnants of a perfect, imperfect day. And when they finally went inside, Ryan looked at his family, his daughter, his wife, the life they'd built together, and knew with absolute certainty that this was enough. Not because it was perfect, not because there wouldn't be challenges or fights or moments of doubt, but because they'd chosen each other, kept choosing each other, and that choice mattered more than any fear. Love wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and choosing connection anyway, about admitting you needed someone even when independence felt safer, about building something real from broken pieces and trusting it would hold. And it did hold. Through job changes and Chloe's teenage years and Olivia's father's death and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a life. Through arguments and laughter and quiet evenings on the couch and adventures that didn't go as planned, they held each other through all of it, these two disasters who'd found each other in the most unlikely way. And they were happy. Not perfectly, not always easily, but truly, deeply, permanently happy. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone see you. Really see you. Beyond the armor and the performance and the careful distance. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they'll see you and stay anyway. Not despite your flaws, but with them. Not fixing you, but choosing you. Not completing you, but complementing you in ways that make both of you better, braver, more whole. That was the real story. Not about a billionaire CEO and a single father, not about dramatic gestures or perfect moments, but about two imperfect people choosing courage over fear, choosing connection over isolation, choosing love, messy, complicated, absolutely real love, over the safety of being alone. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.